Okay, we're back for another episode of Shut Up and Scale. And for this one, we are going to start with Nymaera's topic. And later on in the show, we'll get into all the usual. So, Nymaera, where are we starting for this one?
I wanted to do something very different this week because we have three people on the show who come from very different parts of the industry. And over the years, I've had a lot of people ask me for advice. So why not do it in a big topic? How do you get into the esports industry? It's the overall topic. Now, I think we'd split it up for our preferred role. And I think probably the easiest way to kind of get through the meat and potatoes of this is frame this as though someone with zero experience in your preferred role has come asking you for advice. How would you advise they get into the esports industry in the here and now? It has changed a lot over the years. Things are very, very difficult in many areas of the esports industry. Maybe it changes game per game. But I think this is a topic which I'm sure many people who are very engaged in esports in our community might be interested in hearing about. So for me, I'm a colorcaster. I'm someone that has dealt with broadcast work for my entirety of my career. I've gone into being a streamer and a content creator as well, and obviously doing things like this podcast. But that would be, I think, a pretty interesting topic to come through. So I guess I'll start with my side of things too. And if you guys have any ideas on if you think there's generic advice or something you think would particularly work towards color casting, you can obviously chime in when you want to as well. So I've written down a couple of notes for what I would suggest with people. But the biggest piece of advice I can give, if you are someone who's starting from fresh, trying to get into casting, is start with a friend. And this is genuinely very, very underrated, but start with someone, probably a play-by-play if you're a color caster, or a color caster if you're a play-by-play. And if you don't know what those two are, look it up. Basically, it's the difference between someone who is describing the here and now and then someone who's filling in the picture later. But if you start with someone at the same level, you can develop it the same way, you end up holding each other accountable, and it means that you're often going in with the same expectations and you have a good way to give feedback. Because that's the second thing I'd say, is that regardless of any role that you are in, you need to have a good feedback loop. This is actually just good advice for life in general. If you're trying to just get better at something, you need to have a good feedback loop, because if you improve better than your competitors, you will eventually be better than them, even if they're better than you now. So what I did at the start of my career was I started with my brother. Obviously very easy to say, okay, well, we're starting from the same point. We have good chemistry as well. But we also started with another friend. There were three of us, and we did our own LGL broadcast. So we made our own work on the other side. Basically, we took the decision to say, if there isn't a job, make one for yourself. That's going to come into another thing later, because effectively you need to make sure that you are financially in a position to do this as well. That's another big point as well. If you're starting from zero, you need to be able to commit the time into becoming good at something. It is not easy to do that, especially if you're planning on it becoming a career. So I did it when I was in university. Many other people do it while they have a decent amount of free time that they know they will have as well. But basically what ended up happening was we made our own work. We would give ourselves a lot of feedback over time, and it meant that we would just put in the hours, and every couple of weeks we'd come together as a three and we'd give each other feedback at the same time. That is the baseline for anyone getting into broadcast. I think you need to have good feedback, and you need to make sure that you're getting hours in as well. So I'm actually quite interested. I guess we could bounce between some of our topics as well, because I don't want to just monologue at you in the same way. Do you think there's any generic advice between getting into esports as an industry, either of you two?
So what I would say is so don't go in with a final goal of it has to be esports or nothing, right? This is from the coaching side or the playing side, right? I'd say that if you improve your skill set, whether it's using analytical tools, whether it's computer programming, whether it's just generic coaching skills, if you make it, I must end up in esports no matter what, rather than I want to be the best coach I can possibly be, or want to be the best analyst I can possibly be, then you're kind of pigeonholing yourself into an industry which is a little bit rough at the moment because of recent cuts, to funding. Now, obviously, these things go in waves, so obviously you would expect it to grow again at some point, but it's not the best strategy to just go in and say that it must be this or nothing else, right? At this point in time, is what I would say. Yeah, that's my general advice. I've got some more specific advice on the coaching side, I guess.
Sure. Okay.
But yeah.
The main problem is this, right? Is like I will just do some generic advice because I can do some more specific. But in my opinion, in life, if there's one thing we need less of in the world, it's unsolicited advice of stuff you don't even know if it works, just your wacky ideas. So, in my opinion, there's two types of advice you give, and normally only when someone directly asks you. It goes like this: you either just say what you did, because that worked for you and your circle. Or you try and do it as a counterfactual. Like, what if today you were starting in the industry? What would you try and do? I think those are two way more honest than just here's the advice for everyone, because like half the stuff people are going to say, I'm sorry, it's going to come off like that boomer thing of like, I can't get a job. There's no, hey, go into Woolworths and give him a firm handshake and look him in the eye and say, sir, I got a resume. Like, the problem with that is the boomer's right, by the way, in the sense of what you need to do is put yourself out there, do something other people aren't doing, try and find a way to get your foot in it. He's right on that, right? But his specifics are terrible because his specifics are from 70 years ago and it's not the modern world or job market that exists. So I will tell you, the generic advice I think can apply to every role that we've all done that people don't do. And by the way, I didn't do this myself, but here's the thing, I did though. So you'll see how this is something I also applied myself. When I say this, every idiot dickhead's not going to listen to what I just said and they're going to overreact. So you ready? One of the most important things you should do is this. When you have social media or you are in any Discord or any kind of a channel, do not say a single opinion about politics. Do not, in any context, attempt to critique, mock, or antagonize any industry figure that currently works in the industry as you're getting into it. These two things have the upside of almost nothing. They will win you other stupid, tiny people who will help you in no context and can never give you a job. They will only make it so that it'll be harder for you in the future when you inevitably run into one of those people, you're in a circle, or even one of those people who looks up an old tweet. So that's that angle. Now, what's funny is people might think, but you're no. I literally did something mental like a decade in this industry before I ever gave a single opinion about anything outside of esports or ever in any political context. I never criticised people who are in the industry. There was no social media back then anyway, but I didn't go into big IRC channels and pick fights up here. I never did that at all. I waited quite literally, but this way, even though you won't like the analogy, it is like some Kanye West shit, right? I did all my antics way later when I already had a value proposition that was unique to me, where I actually could sort of get away with it, or I'll never be completely kicked out. There'll always be an avenue another way, or I can in some way always find my people I can work with. I only took that risk then, and that was a calculated one, and I'm fine with the path that's up. There's so many people I can tell you from my personal experience, though, where there was a random one, actually. I'll give you a weird example. There was one, actually, in Counter-Strike where a woman came from Dota as a host, and she was announced earlier this year she's going to be like the new Blast host in Counter-Strike. So you know what? Actually, as you know in broadcast, I'm generally pretty welcoming of people from other games and people I just think have talent. So, because I knew her from Dota, not like her personally, I knew of her from Dota. I just watched Dota for fun. I was literally about to do a tweet like, oh, hey, this person called Nat T. Hey, Nat T, like, welcome to CS. Like, hope it goes well for you. And then what I did was I thought, wait a minute, let me just have a quick check. I did the old Twitter advanced search, and a few years ago, not even directly, just talking with another person, actually someone from the league scene, who's from their part of the world, I think they're from New Zealand or Australia or something, somewhere down there, they just sort of inadvertently trash talked me. And that's an example where it's just like, I just won't do the tweet then. It's like, by the way, not a big deal. It's not going to affect the person's career. But you can see how these are just minor things where it's like the upside of doing that, not in a DM or outside of the public eye, is zero. You didn't gain anything from it. But you just in that scenario, you just mildly piss someone off. And by the way, it's going to be way worse if you've ever actually done something mad political. Like, by the way, in either direction, I'll give you an obvious reason why, even if you're thinking, yeah, but Thorin, that's your politics. No, it isn't. It's everyone's politics. Here's why. What if in the future you want to work for EWC and you've said some mad shit about Saudis or you've said some mad shit about LGBTQ? You see what I mean? I would genuinely say, if you just want to be in the industry in general, you want to maximise your opportunities and your chances to be in it. So I would just take anything that could be polarising and get it out of the equation until much, much later, at which point you have to choose if you want to make that a part of your life and a part of your career proposition or not. Because I do think a lot of people take social media and they make the mistake of not knowing that when you're a fan, if you don't delete the tweets when you try to enter the industry, no one will know when they look back. They'll just see it's your account, bro.
Yeah, because the big one for that was, say, for instance, in the LEC, Neon. That's obviously on the record of those. Yeah. And now they're established figures, and they've set that as line. And by the way, I think I'm on the side of things as well, where I say, look, if you set a line, that's cool. You can set your line where you want it to be. But I think for many people in the industry, the whole point is be consistent and also be aware that it might have drawbacks. And in some ways, I think actually those lines are only really lines if they have a drawback. Like, you're not really giving up anything. You're not really standing for anything until you're giving something up for that. So for instance, like I've been quite open in the fact that I haven't worked for EWC. I'm aware that is a line I've set. If I then work for EWC in the future as well, I would be rightfully criticized for that. But that's a line which I've done, and I've done that after 5 years in the industry for myself as well. So yeah, I think that's good advice there too, because of course that ties into, I think, another big overhead, which I think goes between any of these things. Most of this industry is networking.
Definitely.
Grand majority of it. Grand majority of it is networking. Yeah. You can be incredibly good at your job and not get work because you don't know how to put yourself out there. You don't know how to reach out. You don't know how jobs are available within your scene, and that does change. It does change depending on who you know, what's available, and how affluent the scene is at the time. So, for instance, like there's some great casters I know which haven't been that good at putting themselves out there, so they've struggled to get some of the work. Whereas, I consider myself very lucky, and that's why I'm not going to, I'm not going to do what Thorin said in terms of say like, oh, just follow your advice. I think something that is generic is, you want to be working within the scene you want to get hired for in some degree, because you need to be known to those people because that's part of the networking. But sometimes you don't always know when that will be. So, for instance, at the start of my career, I worked in University League of Legends. I did my LGL broadcast, and then I also did like Tier 3 UK League of Legends. So I was working in several different scenes at the same time. Just so happened that all of them worked out for me in bits and pieces. So you can definitely put your eggs in some different baskets there too. But realistically, that networking of being present in the scenes that you want to work in some form, and again, it's very difficult because a lot of time this can be a lot of volunteer work. A lot of it time, especially early in your career, you just can't guarantee payment. I mean,
that in itself is advice, though. Yeah. Like same as Peter said, don't expect to be pro. I would just say genuinely, even though it also sound harsh, if you can't enjoy each step of the process, I don't think you'll make it. Like essentially, and there's another thing, right? Even if you're doing a gig that might seem boring, like for example, you might not even get to be the caster first if you want to be a caster. You might have to just be a production person or help doing graphics, whatever it is. Make sure it's still at the same time you want some level like what you're doing, though. Like you like to be creative, or whatever.
Observers used to be the big thing that went to cast.
But it can't be that you're only doing it like, oh, I'm hating every second of this, but it'll be worth it when I become. If you do that, mate, I can almost guarantee you're going to in for a bad time. Whereas if you can at least get something out of that, like, hey, it's fun to be part of a broadcast. It's fun to get to shadow people. Like if you have that mindset, I think it's really healthy. Because I also agree, you never know at the end. It's the very lucky few that really make not only money but a long-term career. So if that is, it's a bit like being pro. If you can't enjoy the day-to-day process of practicing, improving, and playing at ERL level, then maybe you don't even know if you'll ever make it to the LEC level. If you did, maybe you'd hate it anyway.
Yep. I'll just add a couple of things to what you guys have said. Firstly, on the bad mouthing people. People in this industry are very, very indiscreet. So you talked about don't put anything bad on Twitter. Be careful who you talk to. Like the number.
There's a lot of screenshots being shared, vlogs, and everything. Definitely, yes.
Like, people will always
people understand it's social currency. So here's the premise, Peter, that people don't know. I can tell you the mechanism, right? This is an area where there's a lot of people will have talked trash in the industry on people like me and Richard Lewis, right? Do you know what people don't know? Because I'm not the sort of person who would reveal this, by the way, other people are even less discreet, is there's a kind of person, Peter, who maybe themselves doesn't even like me or Richard Lewis, but they want to be in my good graces. They'll run to me and show me the log of the thing you said to them in a different Discord that I never would know about. Like, I don't even have to hunt that down, mate. People, again, because it's like Game of Thrones, they'll use that themselves opportunistically to get a leg up or to get in with someone or to get back. So there's a lot of that. Yeah, that's way more than people think. Like, I'll tell you an obvious angle. If you think you are in a Discord server, like, hey, it's just like a private chat in a pub. No, it isn't. Like, that's like if you do a private chat in a pub while live on Instagram. You know what I mean? Like, you might think that convo's private. Look, a lot of those convos get shared all over the industry, especially if you become a person, obviously, yeah.
And you'll find so much out about random people through that too, and not always stuff that you want to know. I often look, unless it's like a safeguarding thing. A lot of the time, I just don't want to be part of that anymore. Like if it's an interpersonal thing, it's not really my place. I don't really want to get stuck down into that. I've been on both ends of the whole kind of interpersonal kind of like social currency thing. It's not pleasant to be on either side of that, actually, to be honest. So that's a really good piece of advice, actually. I think that's particularly in any public facing thing. I completely agree with you. It's not something I noted down, but I think that's a great piece of advice.
And also, let's be real. I think this is actually a problem we've also now discovered about, like, I'm thinking that you guys will know what I'm referencing, but I'm not going to talk about this episode. There was a recent minor scandal in League of Legends with a pro DMing people, right? I'll tell you what that is, but this is relevant to the discussion. There is a type of person in music, they would be called a scene figure, right? Or a fan, right? A groupie at one point in time, right? Yeah. There's a type of person who isn't actually here for the game or even esports. This is their social scene. And that sort of person, I'm sorry, they love drama. They live for drama. So that sort of people, they won't just like spread things. That'll become the topic of the day. And the last thing there's another thing. The last thing you want to be on the internet is the villain of the day, isn't it? Like as seen in that case, whether it's right or not, it just becomes a big psychic venting exercise. So no, that's like an underrated part. Is like, again, if you say some line that you just think's a throwaway line because you think this caster sucks or something, you don't know that might end up being a thing that goes thrown back in your face a year later. And why bother? Why bother? Why not have a private group chat with friends that you can trust? You can say that there and they'll never leak it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, if you think a caster sucks, often it's best to go. Oh, I've got to be careful about frame it in a polite way, like say, why did you choose to do this kind of thing? Often it's better to just go straight to them, right? If you're going to go in.
No, exactly. Like I've had people, have issues with me, and I'd just rather reach out personally. If it's something that we can fix, that's great. That's part of being, humans and being part of a community. You actually have to work out this stuff if you're going to exist in the same space. And again, like there's a difference between that and safeguarding stuff, and that is a separate thing. I've worked with people who have, there's a couple of people who've had like, criminal stuff brought up against them eventually, right? And it's a very rare thing, but over the years there will be bad eggs. There will be occasionally. That's a very different thing. I want to flip this around to the positive though. Because one of the things which I think a lot of people underrate, and this is something which I did at the start of my career, and I think this is something which this applies to anything, you would be surprised how many people, if you actually reach out and ask for advice or help, particularly if you have specific stuff that you want advice on in terms of, like for instance, when I was going into LEC, I asked Ender, can you help? Do you have any advice for working with telestrators? And actually, credit to Ender, I've got a huge amount of love for him. He actually gave me some resources in terms of, actually, there's this website which you can practice on. And some other people like Froskurin actually really helped me at the start of my career as well in terms of industry rates and how to deal with the monetary side of things. Because I've not dealt with a paid casting job before. So back in 2021 or whatever, she I can't remember how that came about, but I was in a call with her and I ended up getting some advice from that. You would be surprised if you just send out a couple of sincere and actual actionable pieces of DM you could send out there to these people, how many people will actually respond to it? Not everyone will. Maybe it's only 1 out of 10 and stuff, but genuinely reach out to people in your field if you have actual stuff, not just like a, hi, can you help me? Well, like a, can you help me with X? I think that I think this advice would be valuable or something like that. You would be surprised how much value you've gotten out of that. I've had probably a dozen people message me over the last couple of years and I've tried to help them how I can. That's actually, again, another piece of advice I think where you would be surprised how many people, if you are well-meaning enough and sincere enough, will actually give you help if you ask for it.
Yeah. I'll say, though, the one thing that I found, pick your moment, right? So this is purely from the coaching side. Don't go and message people during playoffs. You're just not going to get somebody replying to you during playoffs, or they're not going to give you anything that helpful. But also be very specific. Right, like the number of times where somebody has messaged me and said, "How do I become a pro League of Legends coach?" And I'm just like, "What's your experience? What's your background? Tell me a little bit about you." Right, and that, I think, if you can be more specific, then you're more likely to get a response or a helpful response, I would say.
Another reason, by the way, why you want to ask a specific thing is you're actually, believe it or not, being inappropriately selfish of the other person's time if you ask for generic advice. Like, I'll give you a great example. How do you start writing an article, right? That's actually so fucking rude. I'll give you the analogy. Could you imagine if you could actually reach out to Jimmy Page, legendary guitarist of Led Zeppelin, and go, "Hey, Jimmy, I've never played a guitar in my life. How do I start?" Bro, there's a million guides for that. You don't need Jimmy Page to tell you that part. That if you had access to Jimmy Page, what you would do is this. You'd practice the guitar yourself as best as you could a few years. Then once you got to a point where there was like an advanced technique question, like, hey, how do you do, like, I don't know, a finger slide or something? Then he might be able to go, oh, that's where he can give you the tweak. Because, by the way, it's a lot easier also to give advice. That's like, oh, see this thing you're already doing, do it a little bit differently. Trying to tell someone from the beginning, that is like just saying, hey, Jimmy, give me the basic, like, lessons for a guitar. Like, that's actually just, it would even be considered, I think, rude.
Well, so for instance, no, I would agree. And I think and also just unlikely to get help that way because, the way, again, if I give a VOD review, so back when I was on the LPL broadcast, we would do VOD reviews. It was a voluntary thing. We weren't paid extra for it, but it's a thing which I participated in because I think it was good for the other casters. I think it was good for me because you basically trade VOD reviews. My VOD reviews would literally be minute by minute. I would go through the entire game. I'd talk about the specifics. I'd have the overheads on top of it. It'll probably take me 1 hour to 2 hours to do that. Now, I can't do that for like a random DM. I already work too much, to be honest. I stream too much. I have too much content. Today I'm clocking in like a 12-hour workday just because because stuff dropped that way, just so happens, you are more likely to get a response, and it's more likely to be useful that way. Because particularly if these people just don't know you, it's a bit different if you've gone to them over time and actually they're more like a mentor figure. That's a completely different thing. And actually, that might be a topic in the future, actually, in terms of actually how mentors can help you within certain industry things. That's a separate thing. But yeah, I think that being specific with the advice you asked for really, really helps. So for instance, like the big thing which I asked when I was going to LEC, because this was a very difficult thing to come by even then, even harder to now, is effectively, well, okay, how is a broadcast different from being in person to being in a studio? Because I hadn't worked in a studio. I worked in a studio for like 2 weeks or something like that before I'd been to the LEC. So I asked some of the LEC casters and other people around the world, like, hey, I'm going into studio broadcast. Is there anything you'd like advise me to do going into a studio for the first time? And that really helped for sure.
Also, I like this example there, right? I'll use the same exact example. Even if you had just started playing the guitar, don't ask Jimmy Page the question. Again, the kind of person who should ask Jimmy Page for mentor advice is someone who's already like a low-level pop star or rock musician, and that's how they have the network. Here's the other point as well. When Nymaera says he asked Ender, not on day one of becoming a complete nobody, like getting you already done something, so Nymaera can acknowledge, right, he's a person in my industry. He is doing at least the same thing vaguely I am. I can now choose maybe to give him a little bit of a boost or a piece of it. By the way, there's another example. Scale it down. Like if you're just starting out, go and ask someone else who also is like on a 1 or 2 rungs above you on the ladder. They're also going to be way more likely to answer. The difference is some of us get inundated with 1 billion replies and mentions and people contacting us on Facebook. The person who's lower down, they might not even have many people. Maybe for them, they can give you 5-10 minutes to just think about something smaller. And remember, you might think, yeah, but they're not a top person. No, you aren't though. They might be able to help you get to where they are though. And then you keep doing that until you're at the top. Like you can't really also think you can go to the best person in the world and then they'll give you a bunch of advice. It's actually unlikely. Unfortunately, they're the people that are going to be the most ruthless triaging their time. They're just not going to have time to reply, I'm afraid.
Yep. Can I talk a little bit about coaching?
Absolutely. I think this one's going to be very different from our side.
Yeah.
So I'll be really interested to hear what you've thought of.
So I'll make this one quite basic because we've talked about what makes a good coach. And I would say, look, if you have no pro playing experience, just think about what else you can add from outside esports, right? Think about conventional sports, think about teaching, think about, youth groups, things like this, and things that can show that you have good teaching capability, coaching capability, sports psychology, things that you can provide that maybe a pro who spends 18 hours a day playing League of Legends can't provide because they're playing 18 hours of League of Legends a day, right? So that's my advice for somebody who isn't a pro player. If you are a pro player, right, and I think this is quite important, put yourself in situations where you can learn, even if it's from somebody that you don't respect. And what do I mean by this, right? So I think a lot of the time, my experience from working with pro players is that there is in the West, there is almost like an allergy or resistance to just putting yourself out there and just putting yourself on supposed bad teams. If you're worried it's going to affect your reputation, put yourself out. Don't put yourself on the roster, right? But even volunteering, there's many times where, for instance, I'm on a team that's going into playoffs, right? If a top laner from another team, maybe in another region, reached out and said, can I sit in on some of your scrims? In exchange, I'll give your top laner some coaching, right? Something like this, right? That's almost certainly a trade that's going to be accepted, right? And essentially you get the opportunity to learn and see the situation from different teams, right? One thing I would say that when I was a coach coming up, I would always spend my off seasons literally volunteering my time, right? I would be on a team, I would get permission from my CEO, who would almost always say yes, right? Sometimes I'd have to have a 1-hour talk with them to persuade them that it was justified. But basically I would volunteer, spend a month with another team. I would go to head coach on like an ERL team or like a LDL team or like a Division 2, it wasn't called Circuit, a Division 2 Brazilian team, right? And just sit in on their scrims, right? And just see how things are done and talk to the coach about why they did the kind of things that they did with the implication that I will offer something, but in exchange, I will learn about different other situations, right? And I will say that even if you are in an environment with a coach that you don't think is very good, doing things which you think are blatant mistakes, you can still learn from that, right? Because if you want to then become a coach in the future, you can then use that experience to see that to inform what you shouldn't do, And I think that's something that pro players tend not to do as much as maybe they should. Obviously, like, get paid
just
for
to
your
cut in
time.
there real quick, by the way, just one thing, because I think this is actually something which goes cross things too, because I think there is something very valuable, and this goes for many creative things too. And like, I know some people get a little bit like weird about, you know, quote unquote stealing from other people. It is absolutely fine to take inspiration from people and also figure out what doesn't work for you that works for other people too. That's just a quick cut in.
And that's kind of what I would say, right? So we're not talking about perks right now, right? But what I would say is, you know, there is a reason why it very, very rarely works out that a pro player going into their head coaching job straight out of playing almost never works out. And when people go and say, oh, look at those LCK teams, they have all of these pro players on those teams. Those guys have worked their way up through the system. You know, like even somebody like Mata, he was like a third coach, then he was an assistant coach. And then, you know, this is a legendary figure of the game. You look at some of the other top coaches, they've worked their way up from like tier 3, tier 2. It's 3 years before they become the head coach, right? Because they've been learning all of these things all the time. And I think that's sometimes something in the West that we don't really see pro players taking that path up. You know, it's either, oh, I'm either going to put in a head coach in my perfect situation, or I'm just going to go stream. Or I'm just not going to bother, right? I'll just do something else, right? And I think that there's no desire to kind of learn the art. So I would say if you're an ex-pro player and that's something you want to do, if you want to be make coaching your actual career, that's something I would advise, and that's an advantage you have over somebody who's coming from outside of esports, or, you know, who hasn't maybe played tier 1 in the past. You know, that's an advantage that you have over them. The advantage they'll have over you is, if they're competing with you for the same position, they'll have more outside experience from esports, you know, more maybe qualifications, more like teaching experience, more coaching experience in conventional sports, right? But so you have to leverage your playing experience into something that will help you be a good coach. And I think that's my advice from the coaching side.
Okay, I think that's good generic advice. Anyway, again, a lot of this stuff, by the way, actually, we've sort of also given you the secret. If you follow the generic advice, then in your field, find someone a little bit above you. You can ask them for specific advice. I think we've given you the way forwards. Now, hopefully, as a result, you are eating good, because with our sponsor, Huel, you also could do so. One thing that's funny, right, is in our careers, like I've done a lot of broadcast work. I do a lot of work now where sometimes I have to do back-to-back shows and I have a limited amount of time between to prepare food, or if there's not someone to make something for me, I have to plan in advance, get it all ready, have something that can be eaten cold or can take 30 seconds to heat up. One of the biggest problems if you do that is, even if you actually can find something to eat, will it even cover your basic nutritional needs? Like, I'll give you an example of something that is actually quite specific to esports that I think is negative about Korean esports. The best league in the world is, you always see, it's part of Korean culture, but they eat that like dried ramen. If you don't know, that is an incredibly nutritionally poor source of food. That is basically like it's just some quick carbs that you eat that keeps you going really short amount of time. I tell you, that's not filling. That's not something you can go like 6 hours work off. That's more like the sort of thing you'd do if you only had to do an hour and a half or something. So I can tell you, I've done things like that many, many, many times. Like in England, we have a similar one where it's basically like a noodle thing that you put in the microwave, you stir it around and you eat it. Again, you'll quickly realise after an hour or two, you're going to be hungry still after that. Like that just tides you over. That is not a whole meal. And actually, I've done that a million times over on broadcast, work days. Even sometimes if you're just playing the game and you think, oh, I'll eat something later on. For now, I've just got to keep myself going. The good thing about Huel, if I'd have had it back then, is it is actually a complete meal in and of itself. Like, I drank this one, the strawberry banana one. I had it instead of lunch one day, and then about 5 hours later, I had my evening meal. Actually, I was surprised how filling it was. It wasn't like just drinking a shake of some type and something that would go with food. This actually was to replace food. Like that bottle there actually contains 35 grams of protein and 7 grams of fiber and comes out at less than $5 a meal. If you do the powder, it's got 40 grams of protein. It mixes with water or milk in just 30 seconds. It is a complete meal you have instead of food, and you can get and also it has 27 essential vitamins and minerals, no artificial sweeteners, colours or flavours, and you can get 15% off online if you are a new customer. So I would say it's a really great way to just not have to do the prep, already have something you know that will be filling, already hits whatever numbers you want to hit. If you want protein, by the way, I'm assuming it works out, you can hit a certain amount off that even in your quick meal, as it were. Obviously, you just shake it or you have it ready just to go immediately. So limited time offer, make healthy eating simple. get Huel, which is spelled Huel. Get Huel today with my exclusive offer of 15% off online with my code. I'm pretty sure it's LFN. LFN. Oh, it's on the screen. What am I talking? With my code LFN at huel.com/LFN. New customers only. Thank you to Huel for partnering and supporting our show. Okay. The next thing we are going to go into now is there's actually going to be Peter's topic. So, Peter, what was your topic for this one?
Okay. So we talked about questions that you're frequently asked, and Nymaera. So one thing that I've noticed, a question that I often get asked since I've been retired is often a question of how good was so-and-so player, like actually, how good were they? You know, how good was Diamondprox? How good was Toyz? You know, how good was MadLife? You know, were they just products of their time? Or were they really everything that those old fogies, you know, those elitist original esports fans who've been following since season 1? Are they everything that they've made out to be? So I thought let's open this up. Let's have a discussion with Nymaera and Thorin about this. And my question is kind of going to be, who do you consider the progenitors for modern League of Legends, modern professional League of Legends? And how good were they actually, right? And so what I mean by this, I mean, let's talk about some of the legends from the early days. Let's keep it kind of to season 4 and earlier as a rough guide. And let's have kind of a ranking guide, you know, like a ranking guide where we talk about, you know, this guy certified. Okay, so if we had an actual Hall of Fame instead of Hall of Legends, which is obviously blatantly a way to sell skins.
Who's first ballot, who's second ballot.
Exactly. So you know, we'll have like a legend tier is your automatic first ballot if there's a Hall of Fame. You know, you are going to be in your class. You're guaranteed in immediately. We'll call like, you know, an icon of the game as somebody who's going to be, you know, you're going to make it eventually, but maybe you're not guaranteed locked in first ballot. And then third, you know, somebody who's maybe a fan favorite, but maybe isn't an automatic Hall of Famer, but maybe they can make it, you know, in a kind of a weaker year. So that's kind of the categories that I'll have, you know, like a legend, icon, and like fan favorite. I guess is
and we're cutting off at the end of 2014 here, so we're only really doing like the first seasons of League, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So let me give an example. I'll go first to give an example, and I'll just talk about, you know, how good was Diamondprox, right? Nice and easy one. I'm going to make it. So I mean, for people that didn't really follow League of Legends back in the day, Moscow 5, later Gambit, later. I can't even remember.
No, Gambit is where it ended for them, really.
Gambit is where it ended for them. Okay, but basically, Moscow 5, Russian team. I'm sure you know is Genja, Diamondprox, Alex Ich, Darian, and Edward. But he wasn't called Edward at the time. Gosu Pepper at the time. Okay, Moscow 5. These guys were legitimately the best team, or considered the best team in the world at the time. Okay, going into season 2 Worlds, when Taipei Assassins beat them at Worlds, that was considered like one of the biggest shocks of all time. And, you know, obviously they ended up winning Worlds and things like this, but basically these guys were the best and treated as the best, respected as one of maybe the top 3 teams in the world in Korea, respected as such in China, respected, well, I don't think NA really respected them at all, but I think that there was basically a knowledge gap, I think, between NA and the rest of the world at that time. But basically, the best team in the world, or like at worst, the top 3 team in the world, best player on the best team. If there's an actual like Hall of Fame, this guy's the first ballot. He shaped a huge amount of what we talk about in jungling, right? So that's kind of a guideline for how we should talk about these players. Unless you guys disagree.
I mean, the problem is, though, what I don't understand, though, is the framing of saying, were they really they were the best players at the time? So okay. That's a weird question. I don't get that one. Surely we're all just naming the best players of the era.
Sure, but okay, let's talk about a player like MadLife. Okay, in your opinion, is MadLife the same kind of tier of legend as Diamondprox?
So it depends. Are you coming? Is this from like overall level of play? Is this impact on the game? So when I hear progenitor, I think about impact on the game. Well, so that's a different thing. Because there are going to be some names in terms of impact on the game, which I don't think were as good overall level of players, but the way that the impact of the game is really important.
Of course.
Now, as it happens, if we go, obviously you mentioned MadLife. Let's go back to Diamondprox. I think if you're viewing it on that level of game, like I think he was best player on the best team of his era, for various points in time. That was kind of before the season kind of structure kind of came about. So it was more about tournament to tournament. He definitely was the best player on that team, I think, over the course of it. He invented counter jungling.
Yep.
And I think even when Gambit started to be not great towards the end, he had some spectacular games. I think one of the very last games of his career, this was in 2014, there was a game which I very vividly remember being cast. I think it was being cast by D-Man and Joe. He was playing Evelyn. So this is old Evelyn, where you're invisible from the start of the game. And he basically walks out of base and has no items. And people are like, oh, he's inted. He has no items. Surely Diamondprox he's just washed up. It's the end of his era. He goes as Invisible Evelyn, walks up to see which camp they're starting him, goes back, buys a red pot, like, that temporary item that only gives you stats for like 5 minutes, and invades the fuck out of them, and wins the entire game off of that. No one in the world else would have done that. No one else. And that was when he was quote-unquote bad. That was like the end of his era. I think that Diamondprox was an utter icon. I think that his mind for the game is surpassed by very few people. For me, he is an utter slam dunk in terms of level of play at the time and his impact on the game. You can still learn things from him now.
Yeah, I would say this. The problem is, I actually think it's debatable, because at the time, people also would have said Alex Sitch is one of the best players in the world, and he was obviously the carry. Like, he was the guy that he did all the kills. He was just mega mechanically. But I would say the interesting thing about Diamondprox is, along those lines, I've told this story before, that he's one of the most interesting people I interviewed, because I interviewed him in 2013, I think it was, when he actually was someone who couldn't even speak English. I did it with like a scuffed, like the manager translates for you. So even like what he's saying is like, not that great, because he's doing second language English. And then I did another interview a few years later with like real subtitles, where again it was in subtitles, but like this time it's in more detail. And then I did like a third one where he actually just spoke in English, because by now it's like 7 years later, and he's just totally fluent in English. And what's amazing was, obviously I'm quite literally seeing, as I'm getting more and more what he's saying, and at the end I'm just getting totally what he's saying, where he's not even impinged by the translation. Essentially, at the end, it confirmed all my suspicions that whereas other elements, like there's a gag on Summoning Insight that when I had Edward on the show for the first time, I did it because I was always really friends with Edward, and I'd already asked him like every question and grilled him. But I knew that Monty lived in the world where, because he hadn't talked to these guys beyond like for 5 minutes at an event, he was doing that thing where he was reverse engineering what they were doing to be genius, whereas it would literally just be stuff like, so why did you let, Darian just farm on his own top lane and not give any pressure? Is it because of the map? And they'd be like, because fuck Darian, I told him not to pick that champion. It would be like that, or the famous one where it was like, you asked, why don't you time the summoners like MadLife does? And it's like, because I'll just kill them anyway. And if they come back with a summoner, I kill them with a summoner. That. So anyway, the point is, Diamondprox was the only one, though, that actually was doing a lot of this stuff consciously. And I can tell you the most fascinating thing is this, because I don't think a player like this has ever existed. I think the closest you've ever had to this, actually, is in the modern day, when Inspired listens to LS and then they try new things, right? It's closest to that, because basically what Diamondprox did, I realised, was amazing, was he genuinely would just read the patch notes, go into solo queue with the ultimate open mind and just try things as if there wasn't a meta. He wasn't the guy watching, what does the Korean jungler do? What do the other EU... He genuinely would think stuff, right? So the example you're giving, Nymaera, basically was, this is actually the thing that drives LS crazy, where people do things that don't make sense in the current version, or it's a nerfed champion or a nerfed item, but you're building it because Chovy builds it. What Diamondprox would do, in that case of the Evelyn one, was everyone at the time when this happened said, right, well, Evelyn's nerfed in it because you can't play AP anymore, and the AP build was the powerful one because it had like the Deathfire Grasp and all that shit, right? And what people didn't realise was, because Diamondprox read the actual patch notes, he was like, oh no, you can just build it as a bruiser AD, actually. And he's the only person who tried it. And then, again, the gag would be everyone was copying him all the time. They would just see what he did and then copy it blindly. But everything he did, I said years later, especially when I could speak to him in English, he's one of those people where it's like, from his lips to my ears, mate, like, that's just like listening to some super wise fucking wizard character who's just, he learned it all himself from first principles. So I think that is it. Here's what's funny, though. I actually think you picked a bad example, though, saying MadLife, because I think MadLife did that for support. Because the crazy thing people will forget is, when support came along and you were just a ward bot, first of all, this is the saddest thing about MadLife's career. So that's how you know who's only ever seen a YouTube highlight. You're all just going to go, yeah, but it's Blitzcrank and it's... He had the best vision game as well as all of that. Like, essentially, if you want a modern example, he was like the carrier of his day. He was simultaneously the best at at support, but then also amazing at stuff that the other sports can't do. And that's why, in the same way as now Kerrier can play all those Camille's and the shit like that and Bard, and then you go, whoa, some of you guys can't do that. Only Kerrier and On are allowed to do that. MadLife was like that. Like, if people don't realise, a lot of those hooks he hits, by the way, a real MadLife isn't you hit a hook. A MadLife is you like predict a hook that you throw, that you look like a moron if you miss, but the guy like flashes onto the hook. Like, that was like what he would do, like de rigueur. He would just do like that every game. If you ever look how few games they played in OGN back then, this guy's highlight package was insane. Like, every other game he would do one of these blind blitzcrank pulls to a wall or some mental, like, I've always said, I said this on a past episode, I've never seen anyone fully abuse the Thresh kit to this day like he did. He would do the one where it's like Daughter, like, you catch the guy here with a flash predict hook, you land it, you go in, flame up, box around him, bring in a guy off or almost barely on another screen who's the minute comes in. That wasn't like they were joining you on the gag. They just came because you just said, like, Lantern, and then did that whole play without telling them anything and just landed it. So think of, in the modern day, the best players you've ever seen from Kerrier or fucking Mickey X or any of these players that do some absurd play, whatever, or Hillersang in his prime. It was like that, but the difference is this guy did that in like 2012, where people were still like walking to the lane and learning basically. And he was, these are two players, by the way, that I think compared to most others, are very extreme for how far ahead they were in the game. And seemingly, they weren't actually doing the thing where you build off what the guy before. They seemed to just come into it like prodigies and just intuit what they were going to do. It came out the ether to these guys.
So actually, that's quite interesting. Actually, that you phrase it like this, because when you talk about it like this, I can't help but agree. But then I guess my question is, obviously, I've watched a lot of League of Legends over the years. Do you think then that this? So I don't think anyone would dispute Diamond, but I've had some people dispute MadLife to me. And
well, I think they're idiots then, personally.
But I'm going to ask: is that because is he just unlucky that Mata came after him and that he chose to spend his entire year?
He's unlucky that he had to play the last years of his career with fucking space. He was in space prison. Like, I mean, I'm going to back up what Thorin's saying, because, like, I think what MadLife did, and actually, credit, I actually think a tier down or two, I actually think Edward for that era is also somewhat similar for a similar reason, where basically support in the early days of League had almost nothing to do. You were a reward bot, you got, like, gold per 5 items, and you didn't really do that much. What Edward and MadLife both did on a separate set of champions at different points, but they were both fantastic at Thresh, for instance, but for instance, Edward's very good on Sona. They realized that support champions, to compensate, because Riot still wanted people to play support to some degree, had to have such absurdly good numbers that they were just inherently broken champions. Like, Sona back in the day was not fair. There's a reason why, like, her ult hitbox got, like, nerfed in half or whatever it was, and a bunch of her stuff got nerfed over time too because of how strong she was in Season 2. Particularly. But stuff like Thresh, you could almost one-shot someone with Thresh, and his passive gave him like 200 free armor, something like that. And these guys just realized, I can actually do way more than the support role is supposed to do, because, again, they were just aware of just the base principles of the game. I have better stats, I can fight you. They might not scale in the way that someone else's does, but my base kit is so powerful, I can make that work. So I think that MadLife and Edward were very good at that level of it. Yeah, I think that MadLife was the guy that started the Vision train in Modern League. Now, if you're talking about the progression of Modern League, that's where he's a bit unlucky that Mata came after. That's where I'll agree with you.
The other problem as well is this, Peter. Whenever anyone does that whole, like, they're all fucking trash. First of all, you have to realise, by the way, the example I actually give, a similar one on Twitter. You know when a fan just looks on YouTube and they go, Platini and Pele and that, they look up the clip and they go, they're just running. Look, they can't even go around. Yeah, like, if you don't know, when Pele played, the ball was like 3 times heavier and would even hurt your foot if you kicked it. If it got wet, it would be like soak into the leather and stuff. That means, as a result, all the fancy players you see, Vinicius, he couldn't do that play then. That wouldn't be possible on the ball. And then also, back then, people could do a 2-footed challenge and they might not even get booked. That might even be a foul. So again, you can dance around people now, knowing that if you even get pushed over, it's a foul. You play the game very differently. One of the problems in all sports, by the way, is the offense is always incentivized to play as close to like the rules as possible. And so essentially, like, the people always say in the NBA, the example is you just wouldn't have got into a certain play in an area if you thought you were going to get hit in the head. But you can do it now. No, you can't be hit in the head. That's very different. those two, you can still try it and be hit in the head in the 80s. Just would you dare is the difference if you've been hit there the last 3 times. So similarly for League, you have to realise that when this shit came out, they were all playing on PCs without even max FPS alone, by the way. Some of them even had like ping, depending on what tournament we're talking about. The actual tech, by the way, mouses and keyboards were way shitter too. Like the polling rate on a mouse. Some people back then just used a normal ball mouse or something, or basic optical mouse. Like a lot of people in League, by the way, weren't like CS. They didn't have like advanced understanding of the computers. They were just people who played the game because it was for fun. So you have to realise a lot of those things make those shots even more impressive than they look. And they look half decent now. And then also, because no one had played the game back then, that's why these two that we've already said so far are ultra revolutionary. Again, they're not going, right, I just improved 1%. Let's be real. Even if you think Kerry is the GOAT, Kerry improved, like, let's say, like 5% on what Mako did, for example. The difference in this analogy is people like Diamondprox and Mata came along and just the role may not have existed before them. Like, the gap between Odd One and Diamondprox is like an absurd the jump you're making up. Whereas the difference is in the modern day, because it's so stratified and we've all learned from each other, we're doing incremental amounts, and actually 5% is massive in the modern day. That's fucking crazy. This is like certain players. Obviously, by the way, another one we can obviously do here is my boy, but you picked the right era, homie, my boy Froggen. Basically, yes. I've told the story before. Froggen just like invented how to lane. He actually invented the idea of maximising lane and being super efficient with it. Basically, if you like what Chovy's game is now, Froggen did that like literally 13 years ago, something mental.
Yeah, he just wouldn't miss CS, and it turns out that's a lot of gold. Just backtracking to like the whole situation and like the hardware stuff, there was literally an OGN finals played on a beach, folks. That's great, very entertaining. There was literally a Korean final played on a beach in a rainstorm. It was tipping it down in rain. Now they had covers and whatever, but like, oh my god, this is very, very different, right? Yeah, I think Froggen's a good shout out too, because of course I think he was one of the people that really showcased like. He was like the earliest iteration of Chovy, right? Which Chovy is kind of followed on that same kind of lineage. And of course, we talked about him at length too. And of course, Chovy to a certain degree would be on a similar list for the modern day. Because of like the value he brings just from being better at the base fundamentals. Like Froggen would basically unlocked a level of carry because he would hit levels of power in the game which you just weren't used to at that point because he was so efficient at gaining resources. And at the end of the day, League of Legends is largely about gaining resources and then using them effectively. Turns out Froggen was the best in his era of doing that, and not many people even really attempted to do that up until, well, he had like the monopoly in 2012. Really, the next couple of players to do that, well, Faker did it in 2013. And Faker was interesting because obviously he did like everything, right? He was one of the first few players to have so many different strings to his bow that he could do everything, which is why we talk so highly of 2013 through 2015, 2016, whatever, Faker, because he could do all of these things that the progenitors that we're talking about now did, but he did them all at the same time. That's why, again, like he's in a separate class himself. But yeah, I think Froggen is certainly on the short list. I would put him in top tier. I think he just he unlocked a level of play in the early years of League, which just like mid laners didn't know was available, and I found that very interesting.
I mean, I think the thing about Froggen is how rarely he made mistakes. I think that's the big thing I would say about Froggen. We've spoken about Froggen in the past before about how he would aggressively play the lane, right? So when we talk about aggression with Froggen, it was never about killing the opponent one-on-one. It was about taking a trade, getting your opponent 30 to 40% low, 30 to 40% health, and just daring them to stay in lane, and daring them to give you a wave. And obviously back in the day, people would just stay in lane and just gradually bleed CS, and that's how he would get his advantage. So he didn't really.
This was also before stuff like teleports were being used. It was before we had earlier, like quicker resets early because there were home guards and stuff like that too.
Yeah. I mean, to me, there's only one other person who maybe I'll talk about before, but obviously League of Legends is a game that was very, obviously came out of Dota, right? And the thing about Dota at this time period, I don't know if it's how Dota is played in the current day, but it was all about getting your hyper carries like really, really fed and making sure that your hyper carries basically didn't make mistakes. Like you can't afford to make mistakes if you're being funneled gold in the way that carries are being funneled gold in a Dota game. And I think Froggen, and I guess I'll say the person that I'm thinking of, Wei Zhao, who is somebody who will come, maybe we can circle around back to. Those were the two guys off the top of my head I can think that were basically the kind of people that would have done well if they played Dota.
Yeah.
But in the League
I'll give you the segue.
Yeah.
So basically, if people don't know, You know the famous, sadly, this won't even be remembered now, but people who remember the player Uzi will remember this. So Uzi, people went, they got a whole strategy, it's called raising the puppy, and what you do is you all play for Uzi, and then he carries it. That was literally not even from League of Legends. That is, like Peter is saying, from Dota, the most famous example is he was a legendary Invictus Gaming carry player, one position player, called Burning, and that was what they used to do in his teams, even in early Dota 2, by the way. They would just play what was called 4 Protect 1, which is everyone in the team, basically players, like Peter's saying, to get this one carry mega fed, because the idea is in Dota especially, if you are like that godlike back there, you can just carry the whole fight, Smith. You're like, because essentially, without going into a whole thing, what's different about Dota from League is in League you get items, and items give you the stats. In Dota the levels give you the stats. So actually things like, can you farm, can you be harassed off farm, you can obviously even deny creeps in that game. That is massive. So actually these people helping with the lane structure and ganks and all stuff to literally get this guy fed is massive. The only comparison, unfortunately, and no one will remember this now because it was 8 years ago, was the funnel meta. We had that one split in Europe. That was the most comparable thing you ever had, and then you didn't have denials on the creeps. But essentially, they had that style already in Dota, and the joke went, because this is Chinese League of Legends, and it's only right after we're already early Dota 2, and everyone who plays at this point either comes from, the joke is if they're Korean, they come from that Chaos game, but if they're Chinese, they come from Dota All-Stars. Everyone just copied that style. But what's funny is, think about how different this is, because remember, if you go to the beginning, season 1 in 2011, that's actually before they're even, it's only when you get to the season 1 championship, you have a bot lane of an ADC and a support. Before that, you just sometimes even played like the APC. The AP carry could be the bot lane or the mid lane or whatever. That's why when you look back in history, and I tell people, Expeke didn't win season 1 Worlds. He wasn't even the mid laner, but that's also because we didn't play those lanes that way. So once you then get that, season 2, Wei Xiao's already here, by the way. In season 1, Wei Xiao's already playing. It's just, again, the map's different. Then you finally get to the dual bot lane setup. They take this concept from Dota. The key thing is no one else did that. No one else had this vision of it's all about just getting the AD carry fed. And by the way, I think the success of Wei Xiao and World Elite is why the entire history of the LPL pretty much is about the AD carries. It's why I've often said that's also why Rookie made a rod for his own back, going to and staying in IG, the team that for most of its history didn't give a fuck about the bot lane and thought the game was a solo lane game. So that's a cool counter.
Some of the worst bot lanes after Jack.
But he did make it harder for himself. If he'd have gone again to an EDG type team, they already knew from day one it's about having the ADC. That's why to this day it's still, I call it the ADC finishing school if you're a Korean AD carry. So what they basically learned is Wei Xiao, that his team did it even more extreme, because their strat famously was, back when there wasn't this scenario like in the modern day where you have to go to a Baron because of what it does, you have to go to the Dragon because it has the bot. Dragons were just money back then. You could choose to give it up if you got money. So what they would famously do in WE is, this is why Claylove actually used to be just a power farmer. Their job literally on WE is don't ever end the laning phase. Just literally farm forever, because if we stay in the laning phase and we don't take the towers, they would intentionally not take towers, then Wei Xiao just gets to the team fight like max items and max levels, and it just destroy you, and then the whole team's going to play for him too. So that's the other. I do think for AD carry, that's like the equivalent of what these other revolutionary players did in the other roles. Yeah.
I think if you're going to talk about progenitors, yeah, because I think a lot of people took on from that. I don't have much to add on Wei Xiao. I think you've covered that really well. Now, you said that was your one name, Peter. Is there really no one else you put up into?
No. I mean, the one name I would put in the same category as Fogan.
Yeah.
In terms of like Dota optimizing carries. I mean, I'll say one quick thing on Wei Xiao just before we kind of move on about Wei Xiao, which is that this guy was still really good in season 3 and season 4. Yeah, it's just the same thing as MadLife, which frustrates me with Wei Xiao, is that they had loyalty to their orgs.
Yep.
In the same way the Rookie would, of course, have loyalty to his org.
Absolutely.
And like allowed themselves, MadLife is not being kept in space prison by CJ, CJ enters. He's been kept in the partly.
Turns out he's his own warden. He just never. It was just so fitting that he played the chain warden. It's all in the name.
It's also to do with how they actually perceive improvement over there. Though they really think if you just work hard, you improve, and eventually, if you work hard enough, you can become the best. So I know it sounds naive to you or I, but they probably thought if Space tries really hard, he'll get better. Whereas I'll probably think, hey, I've got new teammates, but if I'm a good captain and I'm being an example, though, I think it's only in the modern day, because obviously it's a good point to make, by the way, because in the modern day, one of the things I actually think Knight has done a fabulous job with is the The second he doesn't like the way things are, he's fucking off to the other org, mate. And by the way, along the way, he even gets giga paid every time. Like, this guy's killed it and managed his career. But that's quite you can actually argue that's an area he's innovated the game. That wasn't a thing back in the day. If you were the star, you stayed, and they maybe kicked other people and put other people around you. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the biggest attractions we have from someone like Larson, right? It's a common conversation we have. We've talked about this on this show before. Who are the people who've made the worst career decisions, basically? Who had the tragic careers? We've had similar topics on it. Is there anything else you wanted to add on to Weibo?
No. So that's the only thing I want to say about Weibo. But in terms of like purely low risk, or low mistake. Yield. So I mean, being funneled, I would say Froggen and Weibo, the two people I would have as people that were funneled in a Dota sense, because a lot of maybe some of the other players we're going to talk about, I don't think were funneled in the same way.
No.
I mean, I want to talk about another one of Thorin's favorites, because I think this is also something which is like a real pioneer thing. I mean, like, Flame was fantastic for learning how to take resources, and like the thing about Flame, which was so interesting for top lane, like, he survived in Legacy through Flame Horizon, obviously pioneered. Sure. By stuff like Summoning Insight, you really kind of coined that term, and it's kept his legacy alive in some ways. But the way that he effectively showcased something which has stayed in top lane to this day, it is actually absurd how this kind of legacy of top lane has managed to remain among some players in the world, in terms of like, if you set up my wave in a certain way, I will get infinite value. Now we see that even for people like Bin. You give him like one gank early, okay, cool. He's just got like a lead for forever now, and you'll just get slightly larger and larger leads. And you go 20 minutes in, oh fuck, it's 100 CS. No, it's not as big as that now. They've removed ways to snowball top lane as much, because I suppose players which we might mention later are the people who innovated the teleport top lane meta and roaming out of top lane and escaping that kind of scenario. But people like Looper on Samsung White was obviously a big player of that, or Akon on Samsung Blue. These players which kind of took over from the top lane carry gods, who would do a deep freeze, like Impact in Season 3 would do this. But he wasn't the first to do that. Flame was one of the first to do that. Flame was the guy where he'd just get one gank, and it's like, okay, what do you do now?
By the way, it's actually a thing that when he used to have a website, once he had a website called GG Chronicle, he actually wrote a think piece along these lines. Because if people don't know, there was no LS, and once he was the LS of his day, he was the one coming up with interesting theories. And he once mathematically calculated, this isn't like just a thing that they're doing like every now and then. He basically figured out that the Blaze team, that Flame was the best player in at the time, had actually done the maths. And what they'd figured out was, think about the famous example everyone loves of the G2 super team in 2019 Worlds, where they play SKT, and then every time SKT's taking the dragon, they just say fuck it and go and take a tower on the other side of the map. By the way, that wasn't a standard meta at the time. That was just something they sort of tried offhand in the game, and they're like, holy shit, this is sort of working. Like, this is just like a crazy idea we had in the right. This wasn't what they did in this team. What they did in this team was they'd actually sat down and figured out, or tested it in like a custom server or something. They figured out basically that since they had their two best players were the solo laners, you could argue they had the best top laner, the best mid laner in Korea at the time, Ambition and Flame. And what they really realised was, you can actually just let the other team go and take the dragon, as long as while they're taking the dragon, you just, both the top laner and the mid laner, just sit and farm under their tower and just take all the farm and freeze if possible. And what they essentially figured out was this: if you go and take the dragon, because the dragon is worth gold, the gold is distributed evenly over your team. We are funneling all the gold into our solo carries, so then later on in the game, even though the gold lead might be like minimal, that's spread across your support, your jungler. Whereas on our team, our top laner, our mid, who haven't had to kill anyone, by the way, are just fed as fuck. And then when you come to the team fight, which is Blaze's specialty, now we just win because we have super powered carries. But we haven't noticed the genius of this move is we didn't have to gamble going for loads of lane 1v1 kills and solo kills and skirmishes. That they reduced all the risk. Now, by the way, this didn't work in the long term. This was a specific period, but that's also why Flame then became known as the ultimate like top lane carry, because his whole style was just give me all the farm, and then not only am I going to be ahead in CS, but I'm just going to be super powerful in the game, which is why back then, when a lot of champions were broken, he has all those crazy highlights on the Kennen or the Diana or the Shyvana, where it just made him a monster. And actually, I agree with you as well. I do think if that player doesn't come along, you would never have this vision of top lane, which I've got to say also, as well as the LCK, the LPL definitely later adopted. It just took them a few years. And I still think to this day, if you look, the best carry role in the history of Korean League of Legends is actually top lane. That's the role they can go like 10 names deep. You go to the role like mid lane, you've just got the biggest GOAT names ever, and then it drops off real quick in the tier 2 and the tier 3.
Well, immediately, Khan, Nuguri, Flame, Shy was really good at that point too.
The Shy
as well. Smeb, Someday, Like I can think of plenty of others which I'm Keen's that like already like even without trying I've got like really 6 or 7 out there. Like it's absolutely insane the amount of names you can just go into there. That's a very good point. Yeah, so I think that while he's often underrated for, and it's a team effort, right? It is, but he was the face of it, right? I think that Flame is on a list of people that figured out how to get just like mathematically huge advantages. But I don't even think I don't even think his impact on the game is as high on names we haven't mentioned yet, because we said season 4. We haven't talked about Dandy and Mata yet. What would you do with them, Peter? Because you said Weishao was your last name. Where do you put Dandy and Mata on your list?
Oh no. So last name in terms of the Dota.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said in terms of the top tier. I was like, wow, surely you're not mentioning.
In terms of the top tier.
Like, Jesus, that's bold.
No, of course not. Like, Faker is season 3. I mean, like, we can't just ignore him, right? But I guess one thing before we move on, since we're on Flame and since we mentioned Shy, in your opinion, who was the better team back in the day? Blaze or Frost? Thorin?
I always thought Frost was the better team, because the thing about their squad was they had like a really good team effort element. Like, for example, Cloud Templar, their jungler, wasn't some super sick jungler, but he's quite good at like smart things. It's like no surprise being a caster, quite cerebral. Also, their team had a really unique start where they basically played for team fights as well. These are both like late game teams. But then also you think about like they had the most unusual bot lane ever, because Woong used to be a top lane who was kind of a bit of a meh ADC, but he played because his job was just be with MadLife and let MadLife shine and do all this shit. So they were a really unique team, I thought. So I think there was like better players personally in Blaze, but I think Frost was the better team over. And certainly, by the way, I can tell you, until Blaze overtook them, they were considered the main team, and the sister team was the other one.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's interesting. I think it says a lot for MadLife's impact. Let's just finish the season 2 Korean thing. That people that Frost were better, because I agree with you, right? Like, I think Shy versus Flame was always a very interesting matchup, but I do think Blaze always had the better mid laner, and I think that basically they just had a normal support, whereas MadLife was not a normal support. Like I feel like Emperor Captain Jack was better. I feel that Lust Boy was a lot worse, but I felt that the reason Frost were able to win wasn't because they had anyone particularly special. Like I don't feel Shy was. I mean, he was good, right? But he didn't warp the game in the same way that Flame warped.
He also had more of a mindset, Peter, where it was like, I'm willing to be the weak side, or I'm willing to just be the even though he had this, I think he had the talent like a Flame, but this Flame also had the like, this is why I like it. He had that like Ronaldo thing of like, I'm the star, give me the ball. Yeah, of course.
And someone needs to be there with an league.
Yeah.
That's why so many of the people we've talked about basically pioneered that mindset and actually paid it off. Now, it's different if you'd like said, oh, give me all of these picks, I'm going to ego, blah, 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 and it just doesn't work. But like showing that they can consistently, and actually just mathematically in some cases, get that value is really, really important. Yeah, so Peter,
you want to move on to talk about Mata, didn't you?
Yeah, because I think that Mata, because like there are people from season 3. I mean, I guess, look, we'll talk about Mata. There are some people who backtrack too, but like Mata, I think like there's no way you can't talk about him. I think that in fact many people still view him as like shortlist for Hall of Fame because of the length of his career, the impact he had. You know, he was a multi-region champion. Obviously, we're talking about this though back in like season 4 is where he really came to play though, because effectively he was on. I guess at that point viewed as the worst of the Samsung teams, because Samsung Blue was meant to be like the, oh my god, this is crazy, despite the fact that Samsung Ozone were stronger in season 3, fell apart at Worlds, obviously, because Dade's huge underperformance. We might talk about that later, of course. But Samsung Blue were seen as the better team in many different ways, because they were way better at decision-making mid and late game. But so much of League of Legends has been about early game, and so much of that is because of Mata. And particularly what Mata did with Dandy is they pioneered the most efficient use of wards in the early game, where you just have one ward in key points to spot out where people were going to be. And if you ever knew what was happening in one quadrant of the jungle or in one lane, you knew by proxy, by process of elimination, what was not happening elsewhere, or what was happening elsewhere. If you don't see someone on bot side, they're probably top side. If you do see someone on bot side, great, cool, top side's free to play around. The ability to kind of like ward half the map rather than the whole of it and still get the whole picture was something really pioneered in brute force by Samsung White, and it allowed them to have an incredible ability to read through the early game, which is kind of it's stayed to this day. Like efficient use of wards is probably the biggest legacy which Mata has, despite the fact that he was also an excellent individual player, one of the best 2v2 supports of all time, one of the best Thresh players of all time as well, and just an incredible playmaker. Really, it was him and Dandy working together, which made the early game warding information battle so powerful.
I have a confession to make. And the confession that I have is that there was a year where I thought Mata and Dandy were mega overrated, and it was just their team. Okay, and should I tell you why? It's because they won Worlds in Season 4 on that Samsung team, and they crushed everybody, right? Like that World Championship, they even beat Blue, right? Who had been their kryptonite for the majority of the year. And then what happened is Mata and Dandy went to China, they went to Vichy, it was Vichy, yep. and it did not work. Like there was a game I remember where Mata just played Jace support and just ran it down. Like, and there were so many of these games where I have no idea what happened on that Vichy Gaming team. Although I will say Vasily was their AD carry, so it probably had something to do with that. But it wasn't until yeah. If you guys don't know about Vasily, there's many stories about Vasily. But basically, it wasn't until he kind of had to rebuild his reputation a little bit in season 6 after what was kind of a nightmare season 5, and like Dandy never fully recovered from the trauma of Vichy. Whereas like obviously Mata then went on the Royal team with RNG and all that. Yeah, RNG, yeah, and basically showed that it wasn't a fluke, right? But I confess, there were times at season 5 when I'm watching him run it down for the 5th time in a month that I had suspicions of this guy. But
people said the same about Easy Hoon when he went to China later in his career as well. Yeah. Like the Korean exodus was not good for a lot of players, and it is so sad that it happened to Dandy, because like as much as we talk about Mata, Dandy was half of that equation too. He also pioneered using stuff like Rengar Ultimate to be a vision tool as well. He was the best Rengar player in the world, really. Him and Spirit, obviously both the Samsung players, but he was the real specialist on it. So I think in terms of like how modern League of Legends actually evolved, like you can't ever not mention those two, really.
Also, there's another thing which is one thing people don't consider, Peter, when they did that move, the Korean Exodus, is that's where they're playing in the LPL, something like, I don't know, 3 months after Worlds when they were on a Korean team. They don't speak Chinese. They're just joining the team. By the way, you've taken the shot caller and you put him on a Chinese team. And by the way, he didn't have good teammates either, as you're pointing out. So, like, I can't even imagine what impact you have. And then lastly, the reason why they got fucked, whereas other people actually ended up on really good teams, is it was also implied that whoever it was who helped them, it'll probably have been like a family member or someone within Samsung or whatever, whoever helped get them their placements and helped do these negotiations, it seemed like, quite frankly, just went, maybe they even had a fee, I don't know, just tried to get the highest dollar amount. So most of them got like $1 million contracts, but that means you can't all join the best teams. Like some of you end up on, in the case of the Vichy one, they spent the money, but they didn't have the players to put around you. The difference is people who went to it was the LGDs of the world said, yeah, those are cracked out teams that already have like good players anyway, and you're joining to be a superstar. This is almost like they thought just buying these 2 players would be enough to win, and it wasn't. Yeah. So then also there's the other, like Mata basically has everything. He's like the evolution of MadLife in this sense. So first of all, he also had unbelievable vision control. As pointed out, they literally redesigned how you use vision to the point that I remember something like 2 years later, I did an interview with Nuke Doc, and he said, every single team in the world did that the following year after Samsung White. Every single team in every region. Like it just became the default way to play. Because one thing Nymaera's pointing out here is almost like solo queue evolution. Back then, you use wards largely to just get as much of the map lit up as possible. And this is also in the era where there wasn't trinkets. You can put as many wards as you want. Not only do you try and light up all the map, but also you do things like you put like defensive wards. They did stuff like, right, how about against this team, we just light one half of the map up. And then if you ever come in that half, by the way, we're just going to come and literally roam, jungle and support, and maybe the ADC as well. We're just going to roam. And the second you ever invade my jungle, or sometimes they would even deep ward the other guy's jungle, so then you know all how he's doing his part. This would just set up opportunities to get early kills that just never existed in League of Legends. That would be crazy. That would be like a solo queue play to just roam out. By the way, roaming wasn't a thing back then. They almost pioneered that too, because they could justify doing it since they knew you were there on the map. It wasn't like a waste of time where you fuck up the lane. So another thing people won't appreciate also is that aspect is, I think this all goes hand in hand. In fact, by the way, it's a secret to all the players we're naming. They didn't actually just sit and go, I haven't played League yet. What sort of a player would I be? This all came from who they are as people and their natural style in the game. So if you know Mata, one of the problems Mata and Imp had is they both are the people, like Season 4 World to want to crush you from minute one. They don't want to wait for the game and scale into it and have slight edge. They want to crush you on the first time they meet you, then crush you again even harder, then crush you to like that TSMC. So the extent like you're never even in the game. They wanted to like take your soul, not just beat you even. Well, as a result, they pioneered a style of jungle that could do that. That could actually just create all these mad skirmishes early on, back in the day when actually people did sit in lane and farm and people thought I have a safe lane, or you know what, actually it's just jungler versus jungler. As long as you stay away from the other jungler, you're safe, aren't you? So they created this totally different vision of the game. Then let's add in the factor that he couldn't do in China is this guy was also famously the shot caller of the team. That's why me and Monty never ever give Lupa any credit, because his credit came from doing TPs to set up 3v2's bot lane. We used to joke Lupa is Mata's third summoner spell. He would just tell this. I used to just think the whole reason that guy worked is he was a soldier. Mata was like, press the button. He didn't go, when, whatever. He would just go, yes, boss, and press the button and then appear behind them. Like, that's why he was the third summoner spell. So even some of that, I think, goes to Mata's side. And then lastly, I'll just also put this out there. I do also think that if you don't know, he had like a really, really crazy mindset. Everyone who later on gets worse as a player and becomes a coach has to become more social. I can tell you, even though you're all used to all these Koreans who were really polite, Mata was an asshole, bro. He had that like, I want to be the best and destroy people mentality. And he was a really hard, like punishing teammate, etc. Like, if people don't know, the real reason I heard back in the day they swapped Dardate and Pawn wasn't anything to do with building teams. It was that literally they had like a physical fight between some of these players with that, and they would basically couldn't stay in the same room. And they were like, right, you have to go to the other team. And luckily for them, both teams ended up being fucking dopes. It all sort of worked out in the end, and they were like sharing the wealth. But I thought it was just they were just so crazy intense, these guys. I'll tell you the other cool story. The story actually went for real that if they, that very year where they end up winning Worlds and go to the Korean Exodus, the story within Korea, again, they can't say this shit publicly because back then you'd get wrecked if you ever said this. Back then the story was, if they don't win Worlds, they're just going to retire. They're sick of it. Like they're sick of the drama. They're sick of the practice. This squad like had some of the best. We all thought they were like the best players ever at the time. They just retire if it doesn't work out. Like, I'm actually amazed he has a career and still fucking in the scene now. Yeah.
I hadn't heard that last bit. That's kind of crazy.
I mean, the stories I've heard are things like with Mata was when he was playing with Uzi. Those two guys were like, they started really disliking each other, and then over time they kind of got a mutual respect. You know, they were always trying to one up each other, and then eventually, like, they just reached a stage where they were just in equilibrium, right? And it came out of respect. But I think at the start, what I'd heard is that they were very, very, willing to like, let's say, tease each other. That's the nicest way I could possibly say it. You know, like,
well, I mean, the stories we heard about Uzi from his early career was like very much main character energy, and that's something which like he actually had to like mature through. I mean, you need to have a little bit, like, got to have the power to back yourself. I mean, we've talked about that, right? That mentality of actually being able to say, pass me the ball, I'm going to do something with it. There is something powerful with that. But yeah, having too many of those, especially when they share a lane together, has some issues.
It's also worth throwing out there as well that since we're only doing up to the end of 2014, you have to remember, in Season 2, Koreans get really good by the middle of the season, but we're still figuring out they're really good. Chinese are actually semi-irrelevant until the end of Season 2, except they'd had the odd fluky result in Season 1, but those are considered like, you know, we're in event in China, we've never been there, for example. Then in Season 3, it's more like you have the Koreans become super dominant, the West still all right. By the time you get to Season 4, that is when Korea's just the absolute best. That's why Monty has always bemoaned. We'll never really know. As much as it looks like Koreans dominated League of Legends, if there'd never been a Korean Exodus, it would be even worse. Like, would they ever have? They could have had Worlds where they were just all the top 3 positions every time. Like, that was doable.
Yeah, you look at the teams which didn't make Worlds in 2014, and it's insane, right?
But that's also why in this list we don't have as many Korean names, but also we have a lot of Western names. This isn't like, oh, was he the inspired of this? No. Inspired in his dream day could maybe make a fight. These guys could be better than the Koreans at one point in time if you get the right exact moment.
But it's funny because going back to Season 2, people didn't actually think the Korea would ever catch up. I think
that was a double F thing.
I mean, it was just CLG in general, yeah.
You want to say the double F quote?
Yeah,
the famous
like,
thing
we've go on.
They said something like, we'll always be a year or two ahead, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. We'll always be a year or two ahead.
Apparently a year ahead. I do actually want to mention another Korean name that I think will be overlooked. I don't think this is top tier, but I just want to shout out how they invented poke bot lanes. I think that Mandu really needs a bit of a shout out. I've talked about him previously on this show as well in one of our first episodes on the podcast. So I think the topic then was who's an overlooked, very good player. And I think that Mandu is overlooked very well. And the reason why I put him in terms of like this pioneering class as well is that he invented poke bot lanes. You know, the Zyra bot bot lane, being able to play like Ezreal or Corki Zyra, and just like continually take over bot lane in a way that, you know, we've again, this lasted through today. There are poke bot lanes. Ezreal Karma, still one of the greatest bot lane duos in terms of drafting of all time. That's the kind of thing that they would do. Obviously, Karma didn't exist in its current format back there. But like Mondi was like, I want to give a quick shout out there. I think clearly not the same level of player as someone like Mata that came after it. I think he struggled that. Obviously, he had wrist injuries, so we don't know how far he could have peaked and stuff. But I think like he had a genuinely good impact on the game. And him, he kind of shared another pioneering thing as well, which I quite like from him and Tabe when he was a support back then too, was their willingness to flash in and die for a team fight. I think that on stuff like Zyra, who had like the stupid death passive back then. I can't believe that was the thing. It's like, by the way, you have to die to have a passive like Hogwarts. It's so dumb. And stuff like the Sona as well. You just flash in for a big ult, you die, but you'd find the team fight at the right points. I would say that actually Mandu, and I suppose Tabe for that bit too, deserve like a shout out, not nearly as much as the others, but still worth putting on the list there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think Tabe is a good shout out. Like, he was the one person who played Annie support. Like, from season 3 Worlds, he like pioneered Annie.
I think the only other person was God, was it like Millennium's bot lane or was it N-rated? There was a European support, like, was it Vander played a bit of it? I think that might have been 2014 though.
I can't remember. But I remember that basically, yeah. I mean, Tabe was the guy who kind of did that. Tabe did a lot of stuff kind of outside of the game as well, which I guess we're not really talking about in terms of kind of pioneering. But what I would say is that, yeah, I think those are both good call outs. I think Tabe as a player was very, very underrated.
Do you want to know something funny, Peter?
What?
At the time he made the Season 3 Worlds Final and afterwards, there was top Western pros, I won't name who, told me he was one of the worst players they ever saw play. There's a fun one for you.
I mean, that's definitely one way.
Like, their whole shit was like, this who's the eye guy's God, mate, because who the fuck's this guy laning with him? He's trash. That's what they told me. For real.
Holy shit. Wow. Yeah, I know that their scrims weren't that good. I know that they definitely had the ability to run it down the scrims. So maybe it was a little bit of limit testing, but yeah, I mean, I think that those are both good call outs. I mean, kind of the one. Sorry, just to circle back, just going with train of thought here. Just so that we can kind of wrap up the Mata Dandy stuff. So obviously Mata. So let's call it like SAB. Okay, like tier. Does Dandy deserve to be an S tier like player as well, in the same tier as Mata?
Here's the problem. I actually did an article on this one time, so I remember all the numbers. At Season 4 Worlds, Dandy is the only player that played the entire meta champion pool and even both sides of all the matchups as well. And he was mega. Like, I think he was actually really... And also, people forget this. He was the Prince of Thieves. He was, I think, the best smite ever. He was... Again, remember, you're only getting like 2 years of career at this point in time. But at the time, that was all we had. So he was mega. He was unbelievably good. Like, I always thought the most interesting thing about actually the Samsung White team to me is you could argue it's actually the solos who were like surplus to requirements. It could have been many other different really good players just doing their job, because the bot lane was basically what controlled the game, and then Dandy connected with Mata. So yeah, that was what made it a very unique team.
Yeah, I mean, I would also have him in S tier, but I literally just open game.
His problem is he doesn't have longevity. I mean, even Mata has years more, like you say. His point, he essentially just has 2 years. That's it. That's all.
He is the brightest candle. He's the brightest candle. I don't think anyone else has had like a short and harsher peak as he has, which is so sad, because he should have given us so much more.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important then for people like us to kind of call out these kind of players, because I literally have his game PD, and it's like 3 years of Vici into like failing to qualify for LCX on E United, which is like a tragic career of tragic careers, you know. But okay, right. I think it's just important to call out that because we talked about Mata and everything he did later on in his career, but I think I agree with you that Dandy deserves definitely.
I've got a fun one for you. This is a slight bit more on the fringes because people aren't going to remember him as an individually great player. But believe it or not, the American player that you're mainly going to know to support, Chowster, is actually one of the most intelligent players to ever play League of Legends. I'll give you an example. In Season 3, what am I talking about? In Season 2, so at the end of it, in the off-season, IPL 5, I think it was, or something like that. It was in Season 3. It was early Season 3. I went to like an MLG where they had a day of LCS there, and I interviewed maybe it was IPL 5, I don't know. It was at either in late 2012 or early 2013. I did an interview with Chauster where I asked him, because all I did back then was I just read every interview they'd done. And actually back then, all league pros had done massive AMAs on Reddit, believe it or not. So I did the thing where I read every reply so I could find really interesting questions to ask these guys, because I wasn't from league. So I thought, what'll make it interesting is I'll try and drill down into the shit they didn't talk about in other interviews. And one thing I asked him about once, basically, was he'd made some offhand comment that was about how like he played the minions on the map, etc. And I asked him, and he gave this answer that I think is the most prescient thing ever said about League of Legends. In something like December 2012 or like March 2013, he said, League of Legends isn't a game that's about like champions and kills. It is a game that is about towers and minions. And that if you understand that, you will actually understand like how to be the best team and to win the game. It isn't actually about like solo kill the guy in lane. It isn't about like group together and, you know, win a team fight. What he understood already, literally, I mean, by the way, when he says that, you have to really know the game, unfortunately. But I'm then flashing forward to like, I'm thinking of like 2024 Gen G, how they just like didn't even have to fight you and they would just win all. That's like, how many years later is that? That would be like 12 years later. That's absurd that you could be that far ahead. And so back then, people used to think it was Corp and that what he was doing was trying to get like wacky strats. What he'd actually done is like see through the matrix and see what the game is itself.
Yeah, so actually a specific example of that, 2023 Worlds, there is a game which it's one of my pet peeves, and I think I might have even talked about this in terms of revisionist history. Team Liquid versus T1, 2023 World Swiss was the first game of it, the best of one, right? But people hold in this pedestal, Team Liquid almost beat T1. No, they didn't. Team Liquid were getting kills, T1 was getting farm and XP. And the first time you see a 5v5, the XP difference kills you. That's basically the game. As soon as you understand that is exactly what was said, 12 years earlier at that point. That is a fantastic quote. I love that, Thorin.
And then similarly, the reason why is he was another Diamondprox guy who, because he came in, I think he also played like Dora and shit before, he wasn't coming in like, hey, what's everyone else? He was just trying to figure things out himself. Like, how do you do this with this? And so I'll give you another angle that people won't know. I'm not trolling. He is literally the reason why you know who Doublelift is and why he's one of the all-time great players. When Doublelift became his ADC, people don't get this. Doublelift before that played like support. Essentially, he did anything, by the way. He just wanted to be a pro. He was like a guy who had like talent on solo queue and just wanted to be in a pro team. So when they actually made it so Chauster became his support, Chauster basically used to be, when you played one player bot lane, he used to be the one who did that role because he was a really skilled player in season 1, early into season 2. So basically, he was like on some, you have to make the actual comparison like this. He was on some like Chinese Kung Fu master shit of like, I will be your mentor, but a harsh mentor. And every time you fuck up, it's like I whack you on the head with the stick. And so like, no, think about that. And so there's like a million famous quotes just from that. So for example, if you don't know, in season 2, the two best ADCs on paper, if you just like Flash, was Wei Xiao and it was Doublelift. Wei Xiao was the polished, complete product. Amazing, like Peter said, never make a mistake. If he's on Vayne, mate, the tumble's perfect, he kites perfectly. Doublelift could do all those things, but the difference was, Doublelift was the guy who'd like just run into a brush or a fight, then have to do all that shit and kite out, do all Flash. And so famously, there's a line where Chauster said something to him, like, like that, you made the outplay at that, but you didn't need to. And he was like, what do you mean I lived? And he's like, no, if you were really great, you wouldn't have put yourself in that situation. Like, you'd wait until you had to do that. You wouldn't. The smart move would be to make the correct decision first, then your outplay your hands makes you win the game, not like barely still out. Again, these are like concepts that like now seem obvious. They weren't back then. This is like revolutionary shit. People back then played pro games a bit like soccer. They just go balls to the wall. People just go all out and try and kill people, and they spot a guy, they kill him. Like, so to be saying shit like this in 2012 is like, we didn't even, I bet even he didn't realize how insanely like wise some of the shit he was coming up with was. So these are like the thinkers that invented League of Legends, basically.
And one other shout out I'll give, because I think we should probably start wrapping this up soon, because we've been through a lot of names. The other shout out I'll give is actually duo. I think Toyz and Xpeke with their innovations in double teleport were really important too. I think it's really overlooked because double teleport became the norm in like 2015, 2016, really. But they were doing that back in 2013. I guess it was less good then. But the way that they kind of like ensured their scaling by playing stuff like the casting with double teleport was also really interesting at the time. They also like knew how to like role swap their champions actually between different lanes. They played like Ziggs top in some matchups too. I think that they're also worth a shout out to from the OG of
they even, I can tell you, did the ultimate trick, which you can barely do because it's a mad luxury, which is you don't even flex it in the actual draft. You pick the champions and then Toyz just walks mid lane and Xpeke walks top. By the way, good luck dealing with that. Remember, we didn't have role quests back then. If you were the other team, it's like, well, fuck, you win, I guess. Like, what I mean? Because by the way, they could just do that. They could just do shit like that. It's absurd, isn't it?
So I think they're worth a shout out, especially if we're mentioning some non-Korean names.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just go for one final one. But just going back to the Chelsea thing, it's worth saying in season 2, right? Korea wasn't identified as the top region, right? And CLG played 2 splits of champions in Korea. And they lost. I think the only Korean team they lost to were Blaze and Frost.
They only played the summer split, I believe.
Only played.
It was the NA summer team that played the 2. You mean the NA one? CLG EU played the summer split, as far as I know. CLG Prime, the black one, played both splits.
What was that? Okay, maybe. I'm just quickly checking. No, they played the summer split as well.
What on earth? Right, stop. Repeat the sentence again.
So they played OGN champions.
Yes.
Summer and spring.
Who?
CLG Prime.
Yes, CLG Prime did, yes. I thought you said CLG U. I could be mistaken.
Oh, no, sorry. Right, CLG Prime. Okay. So it's worth saying that Charleston was putting his ideas into action in OGN against the Korean teams and basically beating a lot of the Korean teams, but they didn't beat Blaze and Frost because Blaze and Frost were really, really good back in the day. So it's worth saying that they were like a top 5, maybe at worst top 8 team in the world at the time, right? It's people in NA may remember TSM, but TSM didn't go to OGN. They just stayed and made their fan base in NA, dominated NA, and I don't think TSM have ever been a top 8 team in the world.
No. It's right. As you say, they essentially chose to be a big fish in a small pond, whereas what they actually gambled on the CLG side was, let's try and actually play the best teams in the world and gamble on this adventure that it'll make us better overall. It's just in the end, neither team was excellent, so it doesn't matter. Also, I'll just throw this out there. Another reason also at the time why it was inevitable they would lose to Frost every time, bro, is it's not a fucking like campfire story. When you went there back then, the whole point of a sister team is you don't ever get to the top level of the dungeon and fight dojo and fight me. You play my sister team, and when you play my sister team players, they just tell me everything you do and even mimic you in practice, and I just play them. Then when I play you in the official game, you're playing me for the first time. I've played a simulated version of you and know all the shit you did in the scrims. We didn't have that back then. We didn't have sister teams. If we did, we would have had pay infighting because we're Westerners. Like Koreans in that sense have always understood like Korea needs to win first, then we can fight amongst each other after that,
I mean, I fully agree. And actually, I think this is the most overlooked thing about season 2. It's like the fact that OGN invited all of the top teams. They invited Fnatic, they invited CLG EU, they invited CLG Prime, and they learned from them really quickly, and I think maybe it was arrogance.
I believe they even paid for it all, because another reason it became famous, actually, League in Korea, is because they did stuff like invite journalists. I can tell you. Do you want to know the gag? Is one of the seasons, this is actually when it was just before I left, they asked us, did we want to go? And at the time, I didn't follow League of Legends, so I was like, I don't want to fucking go to Korea for League of Legends. So I think we let like Sharks go as the joke or something like that. Like that's actually one of the first things I think she went and did. I believe that was the case.
Yeah.
I dream of days where actually they support the things around the event as well. I dream of those days.
Well, sadly on that one, it was implied that company might have been money laundering, but we won't go into that one. So.
Well, okay. Money laundering, Saudi money.
That was just the way it was back then, bro. That's the way it was back
then. My final question on this topic, right? Okay, which is XPK, Frog, and Alex Ich. 1, 2, 3. Rank them.
Well, in terms of what? Overall level of play, in terms of impact on the game?
Impact on the game, contribution to the Hall of Fame. You can only put one of them in the Hall of Fame each year. Who'd you put in first ballot? Who'd you put in second ballot? Who'd you put in third ballot?
I love Alex, but I think he has to be third. I think it's Frog and... Wait, is it Frog and Peke Alex? Or I think it's Frog and Peke Alex in terms of impact. Although Peke did have a longer, higher level career. I'd probably put Frog and Peke Alex. Although I love Alex, but it's just the other two were more impactful, I think, in terms of the overall game.
For me, I'm going to put Frog at number 1. I think it's very debatable what you put for 2 and 3, though, because here's the difference. I actually think, like I said about that story, I think Alex Ich was working with much more scuffed teamers than people realise. Like, I'm sorry, I think people like Darian were barely like actual true pros. They were just people who were good at League of Legends and played a few years and did whatever the fuck they wanted. Like, that wasn't like some professional standard shit even back then. And then also people like Genji, which were very, very idiosyncratic players who were like really hard to work. The difference is I always thought XPK had some pretty good teammates and actually did very... By the way, I think one of the best examples ever of managing your career generally, just refreshed his teams over and over again. So I think there's not much between it, but I would probably... Part of me says Alex Ich too. I think he was excellent. Put it this way, I'll give you an example. When I did an article that was like best individual games against elite Asian teams, mate, Alex Six and Froggen had so many, it was blowing my, because obviously they were in season 2. It was actually insane how many they have, mate. Like nuts amounts.
That's such a fair point. I hadn't quite considered that point. But I think Peke also was Peke was definitely had better teammates. I mean, Cyanide was definitely no slouch for jungler. I think Soaz was far better than Darien, and I think he was probably better than Wicked over the average too. Bot lane, yeah, better than both across average. I think if you look at like the first like 4, 5, 8 years of average play, I think I still. Yeah, okay. Froggen's definitely number 1. Number 2, number 3. Yeah, there's more. You've opened up a better conversation there.
You can make a case for both. It's all fine. We're not talking about this big gap in anyway on any of these, by the way.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Froggen number 1. What would I go number 2? I was hoping there was going to be a convincing case for either one. I think I'd probably go with Alex, just simply because Moscow 5 were kind of respected as the best team in the world at one point, whereas I don't think Fnatic have always been a really top team, but I don't think they've ever been treated as like the number 1 team in the world by Asian.
It is kind of crazy how heavy a carry performance Alex could put against the wall, actually. If you remember some of the promotion relegation games he subbed into for various teams, like, oh my god, he was doing some heavy fucking carrying. Like, I really miss peak Alexish. I wish that a lot of the Gambit guys didn't have as many visa issues and they'd had better, the org was better managed. Because that team had, again, like, they felt like they had so much more left to give.
Also, unfortunately, for pure bias reasons, I will always have a hard time with Expeke not remembering Season 3 World Semi-Final, where he was outplayed by Whites in mid lane. Now, does anyone even remember that play? No one does. So all I'm going to say is that wasn't a Hall of Famer. That wasn't a Hall of Famer. He wasn't. He was fucking. He was average as fuck, bro. He was average as fuck.
He was so good.
How did he do against Faker? How did that go?
Well, I mean, a lot of people did badly into Faker. All I will say is
not motherfuckers like Nagne, not Ryu. There's a whole bunch of people going fine.
People actually forget that Nagne was actually beating Faker.
He was doing I.
Basically, the 2 games which the Black Sword won against him in semis or whatever it was actually with Nagle, like playing like Gragas into Ari and just like or whatever it was and just stopping him Faker from roaming. It was fantastic actually.
I mean, I will say Alexic has by far the best life of all of those guys, right? Because he parlayed his League of Legends career into computer programming, into he
with a green card in NA no less, by the way. From Russia, from fucking nowhere Russia into that. Yeah, he killed it, bro. He got out at just the perfect time. He's got a wife and
kids and he's got a job. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Okay.
I hear Froggen's becoming an aircraft controller now. So he's got himself a different. Yeah, he's becoming like air traffic controller, which is pretty cool.
All right, here's my obvious joke then. Let's hope he doesn't have a flashback to that Kaboom game, or it might be like Breaking Bad. There's a fire reference on two levels for you, if you know both the references. You know, all I'm saying. Right, anyway, we have to move on now because that was like fucking million years long. So I will say we have Polymarket to do, actually. So on Polymarket, in a couple of days, there's a game in the LPL. It's IG against Weibo. At the moment, IG is actually 57%, and Weibo's only 45%. So obviously, there's also been changes between the IG roster, if people don't know. So I just want to know, who do you think wins, and which of the two does one make more sense for value? Remember, you can do the underdog if you want, if you think there's value there. So I'm actually kind of surprised IG's up there. I thought people would be more favouring Weibo. What do you think about this game? Who wins it and which is the right side?
Yeah, both these teams have had roster changes. I think it is so hard to believe in Weibo after all of the random decisions they've made this year. Now, I think Jue is a good support coming in because basically he's coming in to replace Hung, who was bringing in Hung and replacing that old support Erher at the end of Split 1. One of the worst roster moves I've ever seen. Yeah. I get why you'd potentially bring in Hung because of some of his domestic performance on top esports before. So the decision-making of Weibo has not been fantastic. Now, they brought in Jue. I think Jue will be better than Hung. I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. I think Assume coming in for IG and Rookie and the Shy... Rookie and the Shy playing at the same time. They haven't played at the same time this year, which is a big difference, right? And then Assume replacing Jachi. I actually don't think that's like a crazy change, but Assume I think is more consistent than Jachi, who has a bit more of an issue. I would find it quite hard to think Weibo would be favored. Now, the problem is IG Weibo is always a mess of a series. It just always is. So, while I think, look, IG are favorites. They are. I think that even with the roster changes, blah, 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 I think bringing in the rookie and the Shy, assume he's a solid AD carry. It's the same core which made it through his 4th seed to Worlds last year. It's very hard to kind of go against them. Weibo just have a way of whenever you undervalue them, they just do something random. And now both of them got relegated to Group Nirvana. These teams are both very flawed, but like these are not like Apex LPL teams right now. Weibo can still just be consistently inconsistent. They are hellish to predict, absolutely hellish. So if you look at like where the numbers are, I'm like, do you bite the razor cake of Weibo? Do you?
Don't you? How can you do that to yourself?
Every time I've said no, they've done it. So if I say IG, clear favorites, I'm just saying there is an unsaid nuance there. I'm just saying.
I mean, if they had still at support, I could see the argument, but you know, like I thought Wei was probably the most underrated jungler in LPL in the first split of this year. I mean, we talked about it already in the show, and like you know, I can't look past IG.
Okay, well, do you want to know the head-to-head between these two teams in like the last year? Okay, IG won the last one, then it's Weibo, then it's Weibo again, then it's Weibo again. And then you go back another one to like a split one, then it's Weibo again. You go back again to their first matchup, and it's Weibo again.
Problem is, though, that isn't with IG as much this year. Obviously, IG's roster was scuffed earlier this year.
Oh, for sure. But I just look at last split when like obviously IG did have the shit mid lane, they did, right? But they just Weibo have a way of just getting under IG's skin. it's rookie versus Xiaohu, man. Legendary matchup. Should Weibo win? No. Might they? Yes, because it's Weibo. They are just utterly hellish to predict.
The other thing is as well, on paper, these two rosters are bonkers. If you just go and look how many like Worlds winners, LPL, there's so many really good top names, just not a lot of them at the best. The key thing for me is this. It's actually the mistake people have made is they know the solos are coming back for IG, but a lot of people don't know they got Assam, the NIP ADC, who actually had a pretty good split. That's actually pretty fine. Like I've got to say, as a rookie fan, I'm hyped for this split. Like this could be a really, out of nowhere, it looked like he might just retire or never play again. So all of a sudden he has like one of the better squads he's had in years in terms of, here's the difference. They had on paper the good names last year. These are actually in theory going to be good players now, like actually today. So it's a pretty high lineup. Like that could be a team that could also snag the last world spot.
I think so. I think both of them are going to battle for it. It's going to be harsh making it through though, because like I think IG need to win like something like 5 at the end of the split. They need to qualify for playoffs, but they need to win something like 5 or 6 best of 5s back to back. Pretty much.
Here's my problem. Hellish. I would say for this one, I do think IG should be better because it's the first series. I think the value might just be you take the Weibo one for 45%. I think they certainly can win the game, and I think you just get mad value if they do.
Yeah,
because they've also got the same players except for one player, so I also kind of trust, you know, an existing structure. IG, you can't know. They could be awesome out the gate. They could take ages of time to wind up. And also, Rookie has not played a competitive game officially this year, so that's a bit disturbing. This is a guy who did every split for 1 billion years, it felt like. So the Shy also was out of the gate, so there's so many question marks in it. I actually just like the underdog for this one. I actually think it's a good angle for that. Okay, another thing to mention is there is LFN Premium. And if you actually get LFN Premium, obviously we take a fan topic. This is how we now source it. Basically, it just makes more sense. You get more bang for your buck with the LFN Premium than the Discord sub in the past because it'll also give you Discord sub access. But if you use LFN Premium, it costs $9 a month. You can also buy the entire year out, which makes it worth about $7.50 a month because it's $90 for the whole year. There's a 7-day money-back guarantee. If you actually get that, then you will get all 16 LFN talk shows onto a feed. Any extra access, like in the future, we'll have Q&A sections for this particular show. We don't have any for this one because no one asked any questions yet. It's only just changed to the new system. So if you are a sub for any of the shows on LFN, if you go into the Discord channel, there is a special thread called LOL Questions. Say it's for Shut Up and Scale. Ask us some questions. We'll read out your name and ask the question. Not necessarily guaranteed we will forget a lot of them, but at the moment there's none. So if you want to be on next week's episode, you've got a very good chance to, if you are indeed already a sub. And yeah, I've talked about all the perks. You can get those other perks on the shows, the 5th play on the movie channel, etc. And so one of the things we are going to do is we are going to source this week's fan topic via LFN Premium. So the fan of choice is or go to lostvenation.com to get the premium, by the way. The fan of choice, and also when you sign up, you pick a show that you want to give extra amounts of your sub to. If you pick Shut Up and Scale, then Peter Dunn and Nymaera will make it about. Look, I'm not fussed. If you pick somebody inside, I'll make the same anyway. If you pick Hot Take Point legally, I'll make the same anyway. But you know what? These guys would like to have a career. They'd like to have money. They'd like to enjoy their lives. And they're good. Hard. And they're doing a good job. So again, I would just say, just pick the show you like the most, because it just makes it more likely that show will be regular, continue on, and then they'll get to enjoy food and other such luxuries. Again, reference to the first point of the episode. They're doing it for the love of the game right now. So this is the question. It's from Big Boy. He says, what is the biggest individual underperformance at Worlds ever? So we're just looking for one player here. It's not team. It's not a Dade award. It's not that you have to be like the best player. It's just what is the biggest underperformance ever at Worlds?
This is, I mean, so you mentioned the Dade award, right? And I think the benchmark is there anyone worse than 2013 Worlds Dade, who came in as one of the best players at the event? Well, presumed to be one of the best in the world for Samsung Ozone, and he just completely shit the bed. They went out in groups. It was an utter disaster. Obviously, things fell apart in the off season, and he went over to Samsung Blue. It worked out very well for him, but oh my god, that was a bad year. So, is there anyone worse than Dade at 2013 Worlds? That's the starting point. And I had a cursory glance across each Worlds to see if there's anything to dive into deeper, and I think there are maybe two you can argue, but one solidly you can argue. Peter, have you got were you thinking of a similar threat?
I mean, to me, there's one clear person, which is
who's that then?
Godvi.
Oh, I actually hadn't even thought about Godvi 2015, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. I'll make my case for Godvi. Best team in, number one seed from China. Really high roster. Flame and Akon, they could play both ways. And they just shit the bed at Worlds.
That's a very good point. I actually hadn't even flagged him, but that's an oversight by me. Godvi is absolutely on the list. The question is if it's worse than Dade, but he was viewed as one of the best players in the world heading into the event. That's a very valid choice.
Yeah, and they gave the only team I think that gave Mordekaiser when the Mordekaiser was so fucking broken. I think basically their prep coming into this tournament was horrifically bad, and his individual play was bad. They even have the Chinese memes from this tournament is of him aiming an arrow, and he aims it in completely the opposite direction, so it goes around the world and it hits the guy on the back of the head. And the meme was shooting the perfect arrow or something like this. Showing why his arrow going off the other way was perfect. Yeah, so yeah, I'm going Godvi, mainly because as somebody who appreciates the LPL, somebody who's brought a ton of pain to LPL aficionados, I would say.
So for me, where my thought process started was, what are the biggest team underperformances in one sense, and how, if they bombed out, was it due to an individual underperformance, and can you really pin it on one person? So for instance, I think it was EDG 2017, they bombed out, and I was like, well, is that a single person? I couldn't pin it on one person as well, so I didn't think that was an individual underperformance in the same way. FPX 2021 is a really interesting
That's what I'm looking up right now.
Because basically, FPX 2021, who do you pin the blame on? I think most visibly, and it is a team fault, and I think it was a very broken man at that event. I do think Nuggery coming into that event as perhaps best player in the world, just so hyped and completely shitting the bed, dying on weak side, misjudging teleport angles, walking up and dying, bombing out 2 and 4 in group stage and then losing the tiebreaker, right? That is just unreal levels of fault. And I think that Nuggery probably, I would say, it was him or Tien, I guess. But the
I put Tien personally. That's what I'm looking up. I'm just double checking some threads. But from what I remember, here's what's sad. Sadly, actually, people also hated on Doimby. But actually, Doimby was a very good player at the time. I think he was probably the best on this team, even at this tournament. So to me, I listen, I know he's the jungler, but I'm sorry, Tien had some criminal games. He had a game where I forget if it was the damn one game. He had a game where he just didn't hit a skill shot, bro. What? And also, he was one of those guys where he was one of the absolute best players in the world when he wasn't at this tournament. So the fact that he had success before and success after is also what's so crazy. I think it's nuts how bad he was.
Yeah, I think you can choose one of those two. Now, I think for me, I give a little bit more safety to Tien because he came in to replace Bo halfway through that year. But even then, they still should have done better. Tien basically came out of retirement. Did he have wrist issues or something which forced him into retirement at that point? Obviously came back out of it. He's done that twice, actually, which is crazy for him. So I looked through the highlights of those games and I was like, well, okay, Nora is really misjudging a lot of these plays. Is it a team play? Is it easy enough to blame it on him when it's actually a team play happening? It is definitely one of those two, though. Do you think that's worse than Dade 2013, Thorin? Where does that rank for you against that?
The problem is, from what I remember, in 2013, I think he was just criminally bad in like every single game almost. Like, and not totally, because people do forget, I think they beat like the American team or something. I think they beat like Vulcan or something. I think they might have won those games because they were on a tiebreaker to get out the group still. So, but at the same time, that's also one of those ones where it's like the gap is what's so crazy, isn't it? It's like you were going from like, if people don't know, they were one of the other favourites for the tournament. They were like one of the top 2 or 3 teams. So the idea you don't even get out of what was actually supposedly the easier group even. So I think that's pretty absurd how bad that was. So it's hard to tell. It's hard to judge between the two, really.
Yeah, so Samsung in that event, Samsung Ozone went 0-2 versus Fnatic, 1-1 versus Gambit. They went 2-0 versus Mineski, like they were the worst team of the event, I think, really. Yeah. And then they 2-0'd Vulcans. They beat the NA team and then like went 1-3 versus Europe, which at that time, given it was like the start of the Korean era dominance,
there's actually a piece of extenuating context that I can't give to any of the FPX players, which is one of the silliest things that was ever done was they were MVP until this tournament. This is when they were bought by Samsung, giant Korean company, and supposedly, I believe people said something like that Samsung just like got rid of I think the coaches just stayed back in MVP and that they just like started over and used Orm or something like that. So I believe it was also implied right before the biggest tournament of the year, they just sort of were like, coaches, what are they? Because remember, this is season 3 for fuck's sake. And and if you don't know, the MVP org famously in all games was about coaching and picking out talent and developing people. So it's even implied they might not have had the proper coaching structure when they went to the tournament. So I think that's pretty crazy in itself, right?
And I guess one of the I'll mention one other thing which I think has extenuating circumstances. Gen G 2018, when they went out in groups, I think Crown was the biggest reason why they failed there, and Crown wasn't underperforming. I think it was just bad at that point. So I think they get a pass for that one.
Yeah, I'm still going Gobby.
Yeah, I think I go for Dade out of that list, but like I think I still go for Dade out of that list because he has the award named after him for a reason. I think that you can split the blame somewhat between Tien and Nuggeru, which again, I guess, takes away from each individual claim towards it. So I think I just go for Dade off that.
I mean, to be fair, there was other Samsung players with shit too. Like from what I remember, I think Mata was pretty bad at that tournament as well. He also hit fucking nothing and looked like a bomb. So, and we are talking about games for a long time ago. We'd have to refresh to get. They're certainly contenders for it.
Yeah.
That's actually the whole reason if people never got why we invented the Dade one. Sadly, this is where people tell me, well, we could get involved. Well, then listen to what we're fucking saying, dickhead. Because people took it to mean that's just a player who had a bad Worlds. No, the whole premise, and this is the whole fun of it, was you had to actually be legitimately hyped as your, like, that's why God V would work. People said this guy's going to tear up the Korean mids. He's like one of the best in the whole LPL. He's like a fucking demon. And then he was really, 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 really bad. That's why it's so good. It's not just like, like there's plenty of Westerners that had a shit performance. The difference was no one was like, they will match Faker, and like no one was doing that, whereas this was a real thing. In fact, that funny thing is, I'll tell you a quick side story, then we'll move on. The gag is this. I actually did say, because this was, remember, the first year we had the Korean Exodus, so suddenly you have real talents in LPL that are bolstering already good teams. Like, actually, LGD on paper was one of the better teams to get in the Koreans, and they had a super stacked, like, all-star type team in LPL. I remember saying to people like Kelsey Moser and Foscoran, who were in my circle at the time, don't let fucking Monty push you around. If you really think they're better than the Koreans, talk your shit. Maybe they are now. They just took all their world champions, and they did all talk their shit. And obviously it went really fucking badly. And obviously they were also buoyed up because of the MSI result too. So they were like, hey, this is fucking, this is legit. And Team WE had beaten G2. So it was the time to do it. Sadly, it was obviously probably one of the biggest fails ever for the LPL, the whole region at the end. Because remember, the old when they went out in the quarterfinals, they all sucked a dick, unfortunately. So, listen, to be fair, there's another piece of advice. Don't take advice from Thorin, you idiot. Listen, that seems obvious now. Back then, I was pioneering my own meta back then, wasn't I?
Oh, Jesus.
I didn't even have to tell him, well, you know what? You don't always land. Sometimes you miss what you want, And even worse, I always felt so bad for them because if you did that every year for 3 or 4 years in a row, you were a moron because EDG kept blowing it every single time. Then, though, if you'd have done it like 5 times, you'd have been a genius because then you'd have had IG, FPX. So if you'd have stuck with it, it would have worked like some mad gambling strategy. The problem is, a lot of people learned their lesson after 2 or 3 times and bailed at that point. And by the time they finally won, it was like, shit, I've been saying the Koreans are the best. So interesting detail there. Right, what we will do now is there's one more poly market, and it is a way more interesting one now, gentlemen. This would have been quite boring if we'd have done this before MSI, because obviously, who was going to win LEC Summer Split? The answer would have been easy. G2 is still number 1, they're at 37%, but all of a sudden, KC is at 32%, the EWC run. Movistar Rider, Koi is at 22%, Fnatic's at 6%, the rest of them are at, Vitality's at 10%. Right, the question is, who will win the split? And then who do you think is the best number? What's the most value?
32%. It was 16% last week when I...
Because obviously the whole perks things and EWC have changed everything. Everyone's thinking very differently about these squads, right? So what do you think? Who wins the split, first of all?
I think there's actually some vulnerability in G2 short term. So normally I'd say G2 are a safe kind of call. I think with the coaching change mid-year and just all of the vibes around it, I'm a little bit worried for them. I would say KC I would favor KC slightly right now. Although there is the worry that G2 scale up, have an early knock, and then they come online. My worry is that with the current group of players and Perks' communication style, I could foresee there being a bit of a fracture and things going wrong with that org. And I think that of the times to say, okay, well, G2, maybe things don't go well for them, I think perhaps now is the time. And I think KC, despite a really bad MSI, I think they're still they have a good floor as a team. I think it's very hard to out-team fight this team. G2 are one of the teams that can do it, but I think KC, I think I would slightly edge over G2.
For me...
Oh, no, go on.
For me, I think... So I think it was 2 weeks ago when we did this and KC were at 16. I was like, okay, go KC. For me, I'm actually going to do something. I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but go for both G2 and KC. Then you're protected. I think 30%, if they're like 30-ish in terms of value, then I think that one of those two teams is winning the split. Like in almost any world. So I think that still ends up positive, right? If you go in on them equally, and I would say go in on them equally because you give me those two teams against the rest
I think
of the
you
league.
can do that. I'm Googling. I think you can do that.
Yeah, and I think, like, look, the next closest one is MKOI. I don't see MKOI doing anything in the split. I think that recent results have really hurt that team. I think that Mirwin is going to get bodied by most people he's up against. I think they might even struggle against Vitality if their confidence starts to drop some more. I think Alvaro and Roaming's melee supports will be fun to watch. I think maybe that'll help him a little bit. I'm just so worried about Mirwin, though. So I don't think MKOI is in the picture for me.
Yeah, and it's worth saying, people might say, why you... where is KC's championship pedigree? They've lost the 2 finals. Remember, this finals is in Nice. It's with French crowd, French commentators. They're going to get a huge crowd boost, and I think that's going to make a big difference, especially with some of the KC players perform better in front of a home crowd, and that means Hannah specifically, which I think will be a big boost for him. So that's why I would say take those 2 teams against the rest of the league. If you force me to nail something down, I say I think KC are going to win the split, therefore go for KC, but there's good value there for both G2 and KC, because frankly, 30% on both of those teams is... to me, it's like 50-50. I'm going to be honest, between one of those 2 teams.
My problem is that it is so close. If KC was a little bit low, I would say take them because I think it's just like, they're the ascendant team. They've looked great. Who knows about G2? The problem is I just go this way, right? Even though people are speculating all these things that can go wrong with G2, they do have insane LEC championship pedigree, though. Like, those players, they could be blindfolded and win a game in the finals. They've just got such crazy mental. They've been in every scenario possible. So I've got to say, unless there's some absurd perks problem, I'd just say 37% on G2 seems amazing to me. Like, I think you will look back and pinch yourself that was even available ever. So I think, personally, I'm going to say G2 still wins, and they do, and the 37% checks out. Okay, that is it for this week. As I said, there's no Q&A for this one. We didn't have any questions. So if you are a sub, go ahead and check out the Discord and put your topic for the next one, put your questions in there, and then we will do a Q&A on that one. And as always, we will return in the future with 2 topics and 1 from fans. So we'll see you on the next episode.